At an elevation of 8,611 meters on K2's eastern wall, a sheer wall of ice rises. It is a heartless, untrodden face of a mountain that has claimed numerous lives. A lone climber, equipped with ice axes, ascends the vertical expanse. His face, shielded by goggles, is set with determination as a voice from his memory asks where he is going. The scene shifts from the frigid mountain peak to the grounds of Yokosuka North High School in Kanagawa Prefecture, where cherry blossoms signal the start of a new term. Inside, a teacher walks the halls, his mind on a particular student. He, Onishi-sensei, speaks with the student, Mori Bunturu. The teacher reminds him that college entrance exams are this year, and that he needs to work hard. He presses Mori about his future prospects, but the young man offers only silence in return. From outside the building, Mori is visible through a classroom window. He stands alone, looking out, a solitary figure separated from the lively classroom environment. Inside that classroom, the atmosphere is anything but quiet. A powerfully built student, Miyamoto, laughs as he demonstrates his super grip to his friends, crushing something in his hand. One of his companions asks in jest how much he's been training since the morning, while another student tells them to be quiet. Just then, Onishi-sensei enters, instructing the class to settle down for homeroom. He announces they have a new student joining them and calls for them to enter. As this happens, Miyamoto boasts to his friend that he'll power up even more by the next break, to which his friend retorts that he should use his strength to climb mountains instead. At the teacher's call, a new figure appears at the front of the classroom. It is Mori Bunturu. He stands before his new classmates, his expression unreadable, and states his name plainly. His intense gaze sweeps over the room. The teacher seems taken aback, while a girl named Yumi whispers to her friend that he's her type, though the friend finds him dangerous looking. As the class murmurs, the teacher prompts him for a more detailed self-introduction, but Mori simply states that there is nothing more to say. After a moment of silence, Onishi-sensei directs Mori to the empty seat in front of Miyamoto. Miyamoto offers a casual yo, but Mori walks past him without a glance, his focus solely on the desk. Miyamoto's smile fades, replaced by a look of irritation. He clenches his fist, crushing the remains of the object in his hand as he realizes he's been completely ignored. His simmering anger boiling over, Miyamoto grabs the transfer student's hand, his knuckles white with the force of his grip. He taunts the seemingly sleepy Mori, asking if he's finally awake. Mori's eyes snap open, his expression shifting from drowsiness to startled alarm. He grimaces, muttering internally that the situation is annoying. The commotion does not go unnoticed. From the front of the class, Onishi-sensei slams his hands on his desk, demanding to know what the two of them are doing. Before Miyamoto can react further, Mori simply lays his head back down on the desk, completely ignoring him. Miyamoto is left staring, utterly bewildered by the transfer student's utter lack of engagement. Later, in the staff room, Onishi-sensei vents his frustration to another teacher. He complains that he's been saddled with a strange one, identifying the new transfer student, Mori Bunturu, as trouble. The other teacher asks if Mori is a bad kid, but Onishi-sensei clarifies that it's more complicated. He describes Mori as completely unreachable, locked in a shell, and warns that when such types snap, their actions are unpredictable. As the bell for class rings, Mori walks alone up a staircase, heading away from the classrooms. Yumi and her friend spot him from the hallway. Yumi calls out his name, trying to tell him he's going the wrong way, but he has already vanished up the stairs. Back in class, Onishi-sensei takes attendance, calling for Mori Bunturu to no response. Ishida wonders aloud where he is. Miyamoto, smirking, suggests he's not coming back. Yumi interjects, telling her friend that they just saw him going up to the roof, a fact Miyamoto overhears. Upon hearing this, Miyamoto suddenly clutches his stomach, groaning about a sudden ache. He asks Ishida to help him to the bathroom. His friends and Yumi watch, understanding his true intention. He's going after Mori to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, on the school roof, Mori leans back against a wall, hands behind his head, seeking solitude during first period. He moves to the edge, gripping the safety fence and looking down with a pained expression. A lone cat wanders nearby. His moment of quiet is shattered. A thuggish student with a buzz cut appears suddenly, his face pressed against the bars of the fence, and lets out a startling shout right in Mori's face. The aggressor erupts in manic laughter, mocking Mori's terrified expression. Thrown completely off guard, Mori stumbles backward with a cry of shock, unable to even stay on his feet. He is startled not by the thug holding him, but by a new arrival. On the other side of the rooftop fence, Miyamoto pulls himself over the railing, a triumphant grin on his face. Miyamoto tells the other student, whom he calls Fuku-chan, that that's enough. Mori looks on, bewildered by the sudden turn of events. Miyamoto had not used the stairs. He had scaled the sheer face of the school building, an audacious feat of athleticism, to finally reach the rooftop. He approaches Mori, who is still being restrained. Miyamoto, now revealed to be wearing a climbing harness over his clothes, questions Mori, asking if his previous school was so bad that he felt the need to skip class so soon after transferring. He leans in closer, accusing Mori of putting on a gloomy act just to get attention. Mori, his patience worn thin, glares back and retorts that Miyamoto is the one who's truly annoying. With a sudden burst of energy, he shoves the student holding him, shouting for him to stop. The thug stumbles back in surprise, but quickly recovers with a smirk, asking why Mori is so serious. Wanting no part of this, Mori backs away, declaring that he understands and will leave them alone. But Miyamoto isn't finished. He offers an alternative. Instead of fighting, he challenges Mori to climb. He gestures towards the edge of the roof, proposing that Mori prove himself by climbing from the ground all the way up, just as he had done. Mori stares, not comprehending the bizarre demand. He points down over the edge, his expression a mixture of arrogance and challenge. If Mori can complete the climb, Miyamoto promises he will never bother him again. Meanwhile, in the classroom below, Onishi-sensei's lecture continues. His words about a living object of power and beauty drift through the air as the view pans across the imposing facade of the school building. The lesson is interrupted when Ishida, one of Miyamoto's friends, stares out the window with a puzzled expression. The teacher, Onishi-sensei, notices his distraction and asks what the matter is, questioning if something is outside. Ishida can only let out a cry of shock. Outside the window, clinging to the wall several stories up, is Mori. He has accepted the challenge and is now scaling the school building with his bare hands. A sudden clatter breaks the classroom's quiet as Mori Buntaru abruptly stands. His classmates, including a startled Yumi, turn in confusion, asking what is happening. From outside the window, Miyamoto's voice roars, demanding to know what Mori is doing. On the school grounds below, Miyamoto and his friend Ishida stare up at the building in disbelief. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Miyamoto shouts that this is bad, questioning if Mori intends to die since he isn't using a rope. He is already high above them, scaling the exterior wall by gripping a large vertical pipe. From a classroom window, another student spots the climber and shouts for everyone to look. The warning spreads instantly. Students crowd the windows across the school's facade, their voices a murmur of shock and morbid speculation. They wonder what he is doing, with one grimly noting that a fall from that height would be fatal. Mori continues his ascent, his hands gripping the pipe tightly. Below, Miyamoto scoffs to Ishida, remarking that he expected Mori to get scared and start crying. But Miyamoto's expression shifts to one of concern as he watches Mori's form. High on the wall, Mori's face is a mask of pure exertion, sweat beading on his skin as a low grunt escapes his clenched teeth. His arms tremble violently, the muscles strained to their breaking point. From the ground, Miyamoto recognizes the sign of critical fatigue. Forgetting his rivalry, he yells instructions, telling Mori to jam his hand between the pipe and the wall to find a resting position. The shouting draws the attention of Onishi-sensei, who appears at a window, pleading for Mori to get down. Miyamoto ignores him, demonstrating the hand jam technique for Mori to see, urging him to wedge his hand in to conserve strength. Miyamoto's face twists in rage as his advice is seemingly ignored. He bellows at Mori not to interfere, roaring that descending is much harder than climbing. From his precarious position, Mori simply looks down. From a dizzying height, Mori clings to the wall, a solitary figure against the vast concrete expanse. Far below, the students who had challenged and then tried to guide him are reduced to insignificant specks on the ground. He stares up at the massive gap between the school buildings, a chasm of air and concrete. The sheer scale of it registers in his wide eyes. A quiet determination settles over him as he resolves to go up. As he clings precariously to the wall, the crowd below erupts. His fingers strain against the smooth surface. Below, Miyamoto urgently calls for someone to give him a rope, and Ishida quickly agrees. The tension is palpable. A girl screams in terror while another student watches, aghast. The physical toll of the climb becomes agonizingly clear as he lets out a guttural cry of pure exertion, his face contorted in a mask of agony and exhaustion. The sound jolts Miyamoto, whose eyes widen in alarm. In a decisive motion, he plants his feet firmly against the wall, bracing himself. He then pushes off, extending his body horizontally across the chasm between the buildings. Using the walls for purchase, he creates a human bridge, his legs locked in a perfect split. From a window, Ishida shouts in amazement, pointing out that Miyamoto supported his entire body weight with just his legs, not burdening his arms at all. Miyamoto himself seems to acknowledge his own impressive flexibility. Meanwhile, Mori continues his own desperate struggle. Visibly drained, he stretches a trembling hand upward, his fingers straining for the distant ledge, as a voice from the crowd shouts that it's impossible. Seeing Mori's struggle, Miyamoto calls out, telling him to stay right there. He announces his intention to climb to the top and lower a rope. Mori looks up, a silent grunt escaping his lips as he stares at his own hand. But Mori rejects the offer with sudden, raw fury. He erupts, his face a snarl of defiance, as he screams for Miyamoto to stay away. In a shocking act of defiance, he launches himself through the air, aiming for the opposite wall in a desperate leap. "You're seriously annoying," he shouts. Below, the crowd gasps in collective horror as Ishida stammers that he jumped. He hurtles through the air, body fully extended, his eyes wide with a frantic, desperate focus. The ground is a distant blur below, A single thought dominates his mind. He will do this by himself. His fingers slam against the concrete ledge with jarring force. Below, Yumi watches in silent horror, her hand covering her mouth. From the classroom window, the other students exclaim in disbelief. He made it across. From the opposite rooftop, Miyamoto watches, processing what just happened. He rationalizes that Mori must have just decided to lunge by coincidence. As Mori struggles to pull himself up, Miyamoto analyzes his form, noting that he needs to perform a heel hook, but his foot placement is too close to be effective. Despite the flawed technique, Mori manages to haul himself over the edge. Students watching from below shout in amazement, remarking on how close it was and that he actually climbed it. Miyamoto, still at the classroom window with Yumi, is stunned. He thinks to himself that even he has never used that route. On the concrete roof, Mori collapses onto his back, limbs splayed out. He gasps raggedly for breath, the immense physical and mental strain having left him utterly spent. He lies there, hands clutching his head, eyes wide with the lingering shock of his feet from across the gap. Miyamoto's voice cuts through the air, yelling for him to stand up. Mori flinches at the sound, startled. Moments later, Miyamoto is upon him. He grabs Mori by the front of his shirt, lifting him slightly. Mori remains dazed, his body offering no resistance, shirt bunched in his rival's fist. He shoves his hand into Mori's face, forcing his head back with a sharp impact. Miyamoto's eyes are wide with a mixture of anger and disbelief as he begins to question him, demanding to know what he is. His question transforms into a furious roar. Miyamoto screams at Mori, demanding to know if he comprehends the gravity of what he just did, that with a single misstep, he would have died. But Mori seems unfazed by the outburst. His expression is distant, almost tranquil. He looks past his furious rival and asks a quiet, unsettling question. Did it feel good? He does not answer the lingering confrontation. Instead, his gaze drifts past the school, past the town, settling on a massive, sheer rock face that dominates the horizon. A thought, a memory, a fundamental truth surfaces in his mind. Over there on that peak, one can get closer to the sky. From the principal's office, a teacher's furious voice echoes, decrying the students as idiots. The shout carries across the school grounds, directed at those who have disturbed the peace. The source of anger is Onishi-sensei, who stands before Mori Buntrue, Miyamoto, and their friend. He furiously demands to know what they were thinking, specifically berating Mori for climbing the school building on his very first day as a transfer student. Mori receives the tirade with complete silence, his expression impassive and distant. His silence is broken by Miyamoto, who addresses Onishi-sensei directly. He asks the teacher to refrain from putting strange ideas into the students' heads. Onishi-sensei glares back, his irritation palpable. Miyamoto then pivots, claiming Onishi-sensei has nothing to do with this and that he, Miyamoto, is morally responsible. He promises to prevent it from happening again, while his friend Ishida bows deeply in apology. Inside an office, before another seated faculty member, Onishi-sensei sternly orders both Miyamoto and Mori to lower their heads in a formal apology. Walking away down the hall, Miyamoto exhales in relief, admitting how tense the situation had made him. Onishi-sensei, left behind, reflects on his own past, recalling that he too was once yelled at for climbing the school as a student and acknowledging that he's still not good in such situations. Miyamoto then reveals to Mori that Onishi-sensei is a prominent climber in Japan. He suggests that because of this shared interest, they are now rope partners, questioning why Mori has been addressing him so formally. Mori is visibly surprised by the sudden declaration. Without warning, Miyamoto grabs Mori's hand, his grip firm. Mori's attention is immediately drawn to the sheer size and power he feels in Miyamoto's hand. He begins pulling Mori away, ignoring the path to the classroom. He tells Mori to come with him, dismissing his concern about missing class and urging him to hurry. Mori is left with no choice but to follow, a look of uncertainty on his face. He leads Mori to the base of the school building, the very wall Mori had just scaled. They both gaze upwards at the sheer face, and Miyamoto quietly remarks on the location. Their teacher, Onishi-sensei, stands with them, also looking up. He addresses Mori, acknowledging that he did well to climb all the way up there, but qualifies his praise by noting he is speaking as a teacher. As Onishi-sensei explains that getting past the overhang requires considerable experience and skill, Miyamoto lets out a dismissive grunt. He then turns to Mori, asking pointedly if he felt anything during the climb. Mori can only manage a confused Ignoring the response, Miyamoto's excitement surges. He gestures emphatically towards the top of the building, shouting about the final moment of the ascent, his focus entirely on that critical point. He continues, vividly describing the instant Mori jumped to the overhang and the subsequent feeling of numbness that shot through his arm, from fingertip to forearm to upper arm. Mori is visibly startled by the uncanny accuracy of the description. The words trigger a powerful memory for Mori. He recalls the sensation not as numbness, but as a raw, electrifying surge, the undeniable feeling of being intensely alive. Pulled back to the present, Mori's eyes are wide with shock and realization. Miyamoto watches him with a sharp, knowing smirk, having confirmed their shared understanding. Miyamoto then changes the subject, proposing that they try climbing Takatori Mountain, the peak they saw from the roof. He explains that the true essence of climbing lies in scaling rocks and cliffs, noting the mountain offers many interesting routes. As Mori looks up from his thoughts, Miyamoto lays out the condition for this new endeavor. He states that from now on, if Mori is going to climb rocks, he will need a rope tied to his body, because one cannot go climbing alone. He drives the point home, asserting that a total novice attempting to rock climb alone wouldn't survive, no matter how many lives they had. Faced with this undeniable logic, Mori quietly concedes. Of course. He stares back, his eyes wide and unblinking as Miyamoto presses him, asking what he plans to do now that they are partners. To coordinate their climb, Miyamoto asks for his cell phone number, expressing disbelief when Mori states he doesn't have one. Miyamoto questions how anyone can connect with friends in this day and age without a phone. Mori coolly replies that he has no need for things like friends, a blunt statement that leaves Miyamoto momentarily stunned. As the tension rises, Ishida tries to intervene, telling Miyamoto to let it go and not force the issue. Annoyed, Miyamoto dismisses Mori, telling him to just go back to the classroom. Without another word, Mori turns and walks away. Miyamoto scoffs at his retreating back, calling him a gloomy guy. As he departs, Mori reflects that this is for the best, concluding that he shouldn't be climbing rocks at all. Nearby, Yumi tells her friends to go on ahead, claiming she forgot something in the classroom. Her gaze, however, is fixed on Mori's distant figure, a look of concern on her face. Elsewhere, Miyamoto stands alone outside the school building, staring up at its sheer wall. Muttering a curse, he begins to strap on his climbing harness, his frustration palpable. As he adjusts the straps, Yumi's voice cuts in, pleading with him to stop. She warns him that he'll be kicked out of school if he's caught climbing the building again. He looks up, startled by her sudden appearance. She stands her ground, her expression serious. Miyamoto, still kneeling with his gear, asks what her problem is. Yumi clarifies that what he is preparing to do is not simply shadow climbing. His gaze shifts away, his face a mask of intense, conflicted emotion as Yumi's voice continues to press him, her words hanging in the air. His confrontation with Yumi escalates. She calls him a stupid pervert and tells him to drop dead, causing him to snap. He grabs her violently, shouting a threat. In the background, Mori Buntaru observes the chaos, wondering if he should just forget his problems and go climb a rock. He decides he is done with the situation and turns away. As Mori departs, Miyamoto glances up at the school building, dismissing the wall he intended to climb as nothing more than a beginner's rock. The scene shifts. Having left the school, Mori now stands at the base of a natural rock wall. His jacket and bag lie discarded on the ground as he gazes up at the stone. He is dwarfed by the sheer scale of the cliff face, a massive, imposing wall of striated rock that towers above him. His eyes widen with intense focus. He reaches out, his hands sliding across the rough surface, feeling the texture of the rock before pressing his palms flat against it. He finds a secure foothold, readying himself for the ascent. With practiced movements, he begins to climb, pulling himself up the vertical face with quiet determination. From far below, his form is a small, solitary shape against the immense expanse of the cliff, steadily making his way higher. As he climbs, an internal voice asks if he feels anything. He focuses on a sensation transmitted from the skin of his fingertips, traveling to his forearm and upper arm, the distinct feeling of the limb beginning to go numb from the strain. He lies on the hard ground, gasping for air. His eyes are wide with a mixture of shock and relief as a voice from somewhere above declares that he is alive. His dazed mind flashes back to the moment of failure. A close-up of his own face, contorted in effort, is followed by the image of his fingers straining, then slipping from their hold on the rock face. The loss of his grip sends him plummeting backward into the darkness, arms outstretched and mouth agape in a silent scream of terror. A sharp voice cuts through the haze, shouting at him to wake up. The command seems to jolt him back to the present. His eyes focus, revealing Miyamoto leaning over him, his expression intense and demanding. The other student stands, stating bluntly that Mori fell from high up on the cliff. From the ground, Mori can only stare back, his mind still processing the event. Miyamoto's expression hardens into a stern lecture. He warns Mori, with an air of finality, not to come to this rock again. He presses the point, asking if Mori now understands how ridiculously dangerous it is to climb alone. Turning away in frustration, Miyamoto mutters about how he ended up saving someone instead of dealing with his own problems. Lying on the ground, Mori's eyes close as a single thought crystallizes. As long as he doesn't fall, it's fine. The perspective widens to reveal the immense, intimidating face of the cliff. In his mind, Mori's resolve becomes a quiet, defiant vow. He is going to try and climb it. At the entrance to Takatori Mountain Park stands a new challenge. A sheer, formidable rock face, its surface weathered and imposing. This is the third climb. On that very wall, Mori Buntaru clings precariously, his fingers straining for purchase. He pushes himself upward, his body a tense line against the stone, each movement deliberate and fraught with effort. The effort proves too much. He finds himself on the ground, defeated, staring at his raw, scraped hands. He wonders how many times he has failed like this. Looking up, his face is a mask of exhaustion and grim determination. From his vantage point, the rock face seems to stretch endlessly into the sky, growing higher and higher. A daunting thought crosses his mind. Can he really climb something so immense? Later, at school, that same defiant spirit surfaces. Outside the staff room, Mori's face is tight with anger as he insists he did not want to do something, his frustration palpable. Elsewhere, Miyamoto tries to persuade his friend Ishida to sign up for a climbing competition, arguing it's a good chance to see other climber skills. He scoffs at the idea of camaraderie, questioning if youth is just about getting along and wearing a number. Their conversation is cut short by a ringing phone. Ishida answers, his expression quickly turning to one of shock. Miyamoto watches him, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes at his friend's sudden reaction. On the other end of the line, Onishi-sensei informs Ishida that someone has reported one of his students climbing Takatori Mountain. Miyamoto, standing nearby, overhears the teacher's words, his attention instantly captured. He immediately confronts Ishida, demanding to know if he knows something. Under pressure, Ishida reveals the stunning news. The previous evening, Mori had fallen while free soloing at Takatori. Miyamoto is left speechless. His shock turns to fury. Miyamoto roars at Ishida, demanding why he didn't say something so important sooner. A flash of memory shows Mori's hand slipping from its hold, followed by the sight of the young climber on the ground, gasping for air, having narrowly survived the fall. He collapses onto the dusty ground at the base of the cliff, muttering in frustration after his fall. The sheer rock face looms beside him, a silent testament to his failure. As he struggles, a hand extends to him. It is Miyamoto, who looks down with an intense, almost predatory gaze. He grabs Mori's arm, pointing out his failure and questioning why he can't make the climb. Mori's eyes widen in shock, while Miyamoto's focus shifts to the inadequate, worn-out sneakers on Mori's feet. Miyamoto declares that as he is now, Mori will never be able to climb that route, not in his entire life. He then issues a challenge. If Mori wants to know the reason why, he should come with him. Following Miyamoto's lead, Mori walks away from the cliff. They arrive before a storefront bearing the name Baltoro, a specialized climbing shop. The interior is packed with technical gear and apparel. Miyamoto gestures for the hesitant Mori to follow him deeper inside. He approaches the shop manager, a man with a distinct mustache, and asks if it would be all right for Mori, whom he calls a beginner, to try on some things. The manager readily agrees, while Onishi-sensei is seen nearby. The manager greets Onishi-sensei, joking about his early arrival. Miyamoto then turns to Mori and asks for his shoe size. Mori quietly replies, 26.5. The manager, overhearing, seems surprised. He then offers a pair of shoes for Mori to try on. While Miyamoto's friend jokes that men always lie about their size, Miyamoto explains that one cannot climb rocks with sneakers. Proper climbing shoes are essential. The shoes are presented, but the price tag, 13,000 yen, is prominent. Mori immediately states he doesn't have that kind of money. The manager reassures him that trying them on is free and suggests a much smaller size, 24.5, would be the correct fit. As Mori grimaces from the tight fit, Miyamoto explains that climbing shoes must be small enough to hurt, as this is how power is transferred to the rock. They stand before a custom-made indoor climbing wall, a unique feature of the Baltoro shop. Miyamoto tells him to go on and not hold back. He stands at the base of the wall, his fingers tentatively exploring the holds. Miyamoto watches, arms crossed, encouraging him to begin. Mori looks up, his expression a mix of apprehension and resolve as he prepares to climb. He felt the specialized shoe grip, the small hold with an unfamiliar, vice-like tightness. His eyes widened in silent surprise at the sensation. This new connection to the wall propelled him upwards. Still in his school uniform, he began to ascend, his body moving with a fluid grace he had not possessed moments before. As he climbed, a profound realization washed over him. A single thought echoed in his mind as he looked up. He felt impossibly light. The feeling ignited a powerful vision, a sheer, sunlit cliff face. With this newfound agility, he imagined he could conquer even that formidable peak, running up it in a single fluid burst. His rapid ascent startled the shop manager, who shouted a warning that it was dangerous to go so high. But Mori was lost in the moment, thinking that if he just had these shoes, anything was possible. From the ground, Miyamoto watched him intently. Miyamoto then broke the silence, asking if Mori wanted the shoes. When Mori paused, confused, Miyamoto offered to give them to him, but immediately added a condition. In exchange, Mori would have to enter a competition. He gestured to a poster on the wall for the 13th Seaside Cup. He informed Mori that there was an indoor climbing tournament in 1 week, and that he was to participate in it. Looking at the stunned Mori, Miyamoto delivered his final, binding words. He declared that Mori was already in love with the mountains. There was no going back now. Miyamoto presents Mori with a poster for the 13th Seaside Cup, an indoor climbing competition. He makes a startling offer. If Mori enters, Miyamoto will give him his own climbing shoes. His expression hardens as he lays down a strict condition. Until the competition, the following Monday, Mori is absolutely forbidden from going near Takatori Mountain. Later, from a rooftop overlooking the city, Mori stares at the distant, formidable peak of Takatori Mountain. He internally concedes that Miyamoto is right. The rock is too dangerous for him right now. The scene shifts to a classroom where an exam is nearing its end. With only 5 minutes left, students scribble frantically, but Miyamoto leans back in his chair, completely unconcerned. He watches Mori with a smirk, amused by the realization that this quiet classmate is actually a dedicated nerd. Meanwhile, other students murmur about Miyamoto's sudden challenge, calling it a dirty move. Just then, Onishi-sensei calls out that time is up. He asks the class committee members to collect the exam papers and bring them to the staff room as the classroom fills with the chatter of relieved students. As Mori remains at his desk, Yumi approaches him. She holds out his exam sheet, gently pointing out that he forgot to write his name on it. Mori looks up, startled. From his seat, Miyamoto scoffs, calling Mori a slow idiot. Yumi turns to him, and Miyamoto asks if she knew Mori was entering his first real climbing competition. He feigns indifference, claiming he wouldn't enter such a minor event, but his friend remarks that Mori might be a good match for him. A malicious grin spreads across Miyamoto's face. He suggests to Yumi that they go watch the competition together to see Mori have a wild fall, adding that he could film it and show everyone. Yumi's expression is troubled. Ignoring Miyamoto's cruel proposal, she turns back to Mori. She tells him that his climb up the school building was amazing and says she thinks he'll do very well. In the background, Miyamoto is visibly taken aback by her kindness. In the classroom, news of Mori's participation in the climbing tournament spreads. Yumi's friend thinks it sounds cool and suggests they all go to cheer him on, asking when it will be. Miyamoto, standing nearby, looks over with a stunned and displeased expression. The conversation is violently interrupted. Miyamoto lunges across the room, grabbing Mori by the collar of his uniform and lifting him slightly off his feet. Yumi watches in shock. He shoves his face close to Mori's, his features contorted in a furious snarl. Miyamoto seethes, declaring that a single fluke on an overhang doesn't make Mori a climber. He viciously predicts that someone like Mori will fall without climbing even a single millimeter. Seeing this, Yumi shouts at Miyamoto, demanding to know what he's doing. In response, Miyamoto shoves Mori away with a grunt, warning him not to push his luck. As Miyamoto fumes, Mori simply turns to Yumi and asks if she is okay, completely ignoring his aggressor. His question seems to catch her off guard. By the time she looks up, he is already walking away. She calls out his name, but Mori exits the classroom without looking back. Left behind, Yumi notices a piece of paper on her desk that wasn't there before. She picks it up, her expression turning to one of confusion as she wonders what it could be. Meanwhile, Mori stands alone on the school's rooftop, looking out over the city. He thinks to himself that he doesn't actually care about any competition. His gaze is fixed on a singular, massive mountain peak that dominates the distant horizon. He brings his hands up, framing the colossal structure as if holding it in his view, and begins a thought. He reaches his hands toward the sky, his fingers splayed as if trying to feel the rock face from miles away. He finishes his thought with unwavering certainty. Want to get over there. His moment of intense focus is broken by a voice calling his name. From a nearby hallway overlooking the rooftop, Miyamoto and his friend Ishida have found him. While he remained oblivious on the school grounds, Mori's peculiar nature had become a topic of discussion in the faculty room. A teacher, holding an exam sheet, called out to Onishi-sensei, remarking on how odd Mori was and asking him to look at the back of the paper. The sheet was covered not in notes, but in a series of dots forming a distinct path. The teacher's eyes widened with a sudden insight. He realized it wasn't just doodling. Mori was climbing. He pointed out the window at Mori, standing motionless outside, exclaiming that the student was crazy. Onishi-sensei could only stare in disbelief. He elaborated, explaining that Mori was engaged in image climbing, a mental simulation. In his mind, he was scaling Takatori Mountain. The teacher noted that natural climbers can perfectly recall a route after seeing it just once, and Mori was burning that exact path into his memory, right in the middle of class. The subject of their conversation stood outside, completely lost to the world. With his eyes closed and hands raised, he traced the contours of an invisible rock face, fully immersed in his mental ascent. The scene shifts to the school's gymnasium, from which a sharp, metallic clang echoes. Inside, a shirtless Miyamoto hangs by his fingertips from the basketball rim, his back a canvas of straining muscle. His chalked hands grip the metal tightly. He hangs there, sweat dripping from his brow as he grits his teeth, muttering a curse under his breath in sheer frustration. His entire body trembles with the immense strain. Through the window, his gaze falls upon Mori, still standing outside, placid and focused, a stark contrast to his own brutal physical effort. With a guttural roar of exertion and rage, Miyamoto's grip finally gives way, and he lets go of the rim. He lands hard on his feet, breathing heavily. His frustration coalesces into a sharp, competitive glare. He decides then and there. They would both enter the competition, and he would show Mori the undeniable difference between them. A crowd gathers outside the venue for the 13th Seaside Cup. A sign directs competitors toward the entrant isolation room as a lone, hooded figure, Mori Bunru, walks toward the building with purpose. His face is set in an expression of intense focus, his dark eyes sharp and unwavering as he prepares for the challenge ahead. As he proceeds through the entrance, Mori finds the process annoying. A loud voice suddenly calls out to him. It is Miyamoto, wearing a coach's pass and grinning, who exclaims that he knew Mori would show up. He urges him to hurry and get ready. They enter the isolation room, a large gymnasium where a massive climbing wall stands at the far end. Other entrants are scattered about, stretching and preparing their equipment. The sharp, metallic click of a carabiner locking into place signifies the start of preparations. On the practice wall, Miyamoto demonstrates the safety procedures to Mori and Ishida. He explains that climbers must keep their rope clipped through the carabiners on the wall, ensuring that even if they fall, they won't hit the ground. He continues, clarifying that the objective is to see who can climb the highest within a set time limit. Those are the rules of the competition. Mori listens intently, his eyes wide as he takes in the information. Miyamoto then asks if Mori has any questions. Mori bluntly replies, "Not really." Internally, Miyamoto curses, wondering why he even bothered with this situation, just as another climber calls down to him from the wall. Having heard enough, Mori turns to leave the room. Miyamoto's friends, including Ishida, erupt in protest, shouting at him that he can't just leave whenever he wants. Mori looks back, genuinely confused by their outburst. Miyamoto steps in front of the door, blocking Mori's exit. He confirms that his friends are right. Leaving the isolation room will result in disqualification. Mori simply stares back, processing this rule. He stood at the threshold, the rule echoing in the isolation room. To ensure fairness in the contest, entrants were not allowed any prior information about the tournament's climbing wall. Onishi-sensei approached Mori, explaining that the point of the challenge was to climb a route one has only just seen for the first time, an on-site climb. Nearby, Miyamoto's friends expressed disbelief that Mori was only learning this now. The teacher instructed Mori to remain on standby, as soon all contestants would have a 6-minute observation period to inspect the wall. While they waited, Miyamoto suddenly began scaling a small practice wall in the room, his movements filled with an unexpected burst of energy. His friend, Ishida, watched in confusion, wondering what Miyamoto was planning after he had been so dismissive of competitions. Miyamoto ignored him, his face contorted with effort as he gripped the holds, flexing his fingers with a grating sound. He then abruptly let go, crashing onto the mat below. Ishida cried out his name in alarm, but Miyamoto was already reaching for a bottle of water, his focus unbroken. Onishi-sensei identified the technique for Mori, supercompensation. He explained that Miyamoto was pushing his muscles to their limit so that after a short recovery, their capabilities would increase. It was a trump card, one that could be used only a few times a day. Mori listened, a look of understanding dawning on his face as he watched Miyamoto. A grim, triumphant smile spread across Miyamoto's face. His body was primed, his muscles burning with stored energy. He was ready. Just then, a competition official announced that the observation time would begin momentarily, instructing all entrants to gather at the entrance gate. Miyamoto's focus sharpened, and even Onishi-sensei seemed to steel himself for what was to come. As the others began to move, Miyamoto turned to Mori, his face inches away, and declared with quiet intensity that there was no way in hell he would lose to him. He then turned and walked away, joining the group of climbers heading out of the isolation room. Mori watched him go, his expression unreadable. He is approached by his teacher, Onishi-sensei, who presents him with a pair of climbing shoes. The teacher explains that these are the shoes he had promised. Taking them, Mori sits on a bench and begins to put them on, his expression still tense and focused. As he secures the shoes, Onishi-sensei imparts some final advice. He tells Mori that this will be his first true experience of what climbing is, that everything is on site, and that he must remember the feeling with his body. The teacher's words are immediately followed by a loud announcement declaring the start of the 13th Seaside Cup Open Exhibition and the All-Japan Championship Kanto Area Preliminaries, signaling the event's commencement to the gathered crowd of competitors. Elsewhere, Yumi and her friend hurry through a hallway, with the friend complaining that Yumi is too slow and that the event has already started. Below them, other students press against a window, eager to watch. A bright light floods a doorway as an official summons the contestants, including Mori and Miyamoto, to enter for the men's primary observation period. Stepping through, they're confronted by the sight of the arena's main feature, a colossal and intimidatingly complex climbing wall, riddled with holds of all shapes and sizes. The group of climbers, Mori and Miyamoto among them, stands together, their expressions a mix of awe and intense focus as they gaze up at the massive structure. Miyamoto's face splits into a wide, almost manic grin as he laughs, finding the wall to be an interesting challenge. Mori, however, looks completely stunned, muttering in disbelief about the sheer scale of the wall. His heart pounds his chest as he stares upward, overwhelmed. At that moment, an announcer's voice echoes through the arena, declaring that the 6-minute observation period has officially begun. Mori Bunnaru's eyes are wide, his pupils dilated as he stares forward, completely transfixed by the sight before him. Other climbers share his focus, their faces upturned in a mixture of awe and bewilderment. One that breathes out, "Well, what is this?" This wall, in contrast, a bead of sweat rolls down Miyamoto's temple as a confident, almost predatory smile spreads across his face. He lets out a quiet, knowing laugh. A digital clock flashes 5:59, announcing that the 6-minute observation period for male contestants has begun. Amidst the crowd of competitors, Miyamoto whirls around and yells at Mori, telling the spaced-out student that the event has already started. Mori looks back, his expression blank with confusion. The scene pulls back to reveal the immense scale of the venue. A massive, roaring crowd fills the spectator stands. Down on the floor, Mori stands apart from the other climbers, his gaze still fixed on the imposing wall before him. From the crowd, Yumi and her friend spot familiar faces, noticing Fukumoto and Onishi-sensei. Nearby, Miyamoto's friends comment on the large turnout for the Kanto tournament. One of them, Ishida, then points out Yumi's presence to the group. Ishida's attention is quickly diverted as he spots another figure, exclaiming, "Look, look, there's Mori-kun." At that exact moment, Miyamoto confronts Mori, grabbing his shoulder. Yumi watches the tense encounter, a question forming on her lips. As Yumi's friend points out Miyamoto's presence, Onishi-sensei remarks to another teacher that Miyamoto is surprisingly fixated on Bunshan, especially after insisting he wouldn't enter. Elsewhere, Fukumoto impatiently asks when the climbing will start. Yumi silently absorbs the teacher's observation. The spectators, including Onishi-sensei, peering through binoculars, try to make sense of the wall. Miyamoto's friends wonder aloud what everyone is doing. Unbothered, Mori continues his silent, methodical analysis of the route. An experienced observer explains the wall's true nature. At a glance, it seems one can just grab holds randomly, but it is a trap. The wall is constructed with a precise logic, like a shogi problem, where a single wrong move guarantees a fall. From the crowd, Yumi watches the climbers, a small smile on her face. She understands the pressure. With the competition being a single-attempt match, everyone is desperately trying to read a route and etch the procedure into their minds. It requires, she realizes, a significant amount of brain power. As the clock ticks down past the 4-minute mark, her friend Ishida points towards Mori, noting that he's just been standing there the whole time. Yumi voices her concern, but Ishida dismisses it as inexperience, claiming that all Mori can do is stare. Below, Mori remains motionless, his gaze fixed on the wall. In stark contrast, Miyamoto is already deep in a mental simulation of the climb. He visualizes his hands on the holds, questioning each move. Ishida smirks, telling Yumi that Miyamoto has in the bag and directs her to look at his body. She looks and is taken aback. Miyamoto is already drenched in sweat. Ishida explains that Miyamoto is already climbing the wall in his mind, his muscles firing with electric impulses, his heart rate rising, and his arms pumping as if he were actually ascending. The intensity of this phantom climb consumes him. His teeth are gritted, saliva dripping as his body strains against imaginary gravity. His arm reaches for a hold that exists only in his thoughts, muscles bulging with the effort. From a distance, Mori's eyes wide, observing. His focus narrows to Miyamoto's hand as it clenches and flexes with imagined exertion. The strain of the mental rehearsal is etched on Miyamoto's face. Sweat beads on his skin as his eyes stare, wide and strained, his lips pulled back in a grimace of extreme effort. While Miyamoto pushes his mental limits, Mori remains placid, his expression unreadable, almost as if he's given up. Nearby, with only a minute and a half remaining, other climbers express their frustration, admitting they can't decipher a route. His simulation seemingly complete, Miyamoto turns from the wall and looks over at Mori. With condescending certainty, he tells him that no matter how much he looks, there's no way he could possibly understand it. He walks away, leaving Mori alone before the wall as the timer shows just 59 seconds remaining. Ishida watches Miyamoto go, remarking on how amazing he is. Mori's gaze, however, remains fixed on the wall, his eyes tracing the intricate patterns of the holds. His eyes widen in sudden, stark realization. Before him, the climbing wall stands as a complex puzzle of holds. As he stares, his focus intensifies, his mind beginning to dissect the impossible surface. The physical wall dissolves in his perception, replaced by a dark void filled with faint, star-like points of light. The holds have become a distant constellation. Within this mental space, the points of light begin to connect, tracing a faint path through the darkness, superimposed over the ghost of the wall. The path solidifies for a moment, a clear sequence emerging from the void, before the vision begins to recede. Then, with a final flash of insight, the entire route ignites in his mind, a brilliant constellation blazing across the wall's surface, every move perfectly mapped. The intensity of the vision shatters. Mori gasps, finding himself with his hands raised as if pressing against the very wall he had just conquered in his mind, his eyes wide with shock. A harsh buzzer sounds as the timer strikes 0. A competition official shouts for all entrants to return to the isolation room. The observation period is officially over. Still lost in his trance, Mori doesn't move. The official approaches, telling him time is up. Miyamoto, watching from nearby, impatiently yells for player number 3 to go back, declaring it's already over. Mori's hands begin to tremble. He slowly lowers his gaze to his own hand, a look of bewilderment on his face. A strange warmth spreads through his limbs as he realizes with a start, "My arms are hot." as an announcer's voice booms, declaring the start of the men's preliminary competition for the Kanto Area Seaside Cup. Mori looks back at the wall. He thinks to himself that he liked that wall, a quiet acknowledgement of the challenge he just surmounted. Before a packed crowd, the 13th Kanto Area Tournament, the Seaside Cup, is underway. The announcer declares the start of the men's preliminary competition, focusing all attention on the immense and complex climbing wall. The first competitor, Yano Yuki, is already on the wall. Below, Miyamoto watches from the sidelines as the crowd, including Mori Buntaru in the foreground, observes in hushed silence. Elsewhere in the stands, Ishida explains to a friend that competitors are kept in an isolation room to prevent them from seeing others climb and gaining an advantage. Nearby, Yumi asks her companion where Fukumoto, Miyamoto, and Mori are. They are in that very room, where the air is thick with anticipation. Miyamoto appears relaxed, but Mori is coiled with nervous energy, his leg trembling. Fukumoto sits apart, a silent, brooding presence. A sudden collective gasp from the main hall electrifies the isolation room. The waiting climbers, including Miyamoto and Mori, turn their heads in unified shock. Back in the stands, the reason becomes clear. Ishida remarks that the first climber, Yano, was a top-ranked All-Japan competitor. The subdued reaction from the crowd could only mean one thing. He fell, and far too early. The tone of the cheer was deep with disappointment. The news sends a wave of unease through the isolation room, with Ishida and his friend realizing how rough the wall must be. A competition official enters, calling for player number 2 to enter the hall. He then instructs Mori, contestant number 3, to prepare his rope. Mori quietly affirms. As Mori begins his preparations, Fukumoto watches him from beneath the shadow of his hood, his expression intense and unreadable. Out in the arena, the competition moves on. Yumi and her friend remark on how fast the first climber's turn was. The announcer introduces the next contestant, number 2, Inoue Takashi, who strides forward confidently. He begins his ascent, but Yumi's friend immediately predicts his failure. On the wall, Inoue's confidence evaporates as his hand slips on a hold, his climb already in jeopardy. Among the spectators, Onishi-sensei's eyes widen in recognition as he spots a familiar face, calling out to the store manager. Yumi and another student look on, surprised to see him there. Yumi turns to the man, asking how he could have possibly known the climber was going to fall. The manager puffs out his chest with pride, boasting that his prediction is the result of a compilation of a quarter-century of climbing knowledge, for which he pulled 3 all-nighters, pushing all other work aside. He explains that the climber's procedure is simply wrong. As he speaks, the competitor, Inoue, is visible on the wall, straining against the difficult holds. The manager simply advises Yumi to watch closely. His fingers, white with chalk, slip from the hold. With a grunt of pained realization that he cannot reach the next point, his grip fails completely, and he falls. As Inoue plummets, the manager continues his lesson for a wide-eyed Yumi. He explains that every single move determines if a climber can reach the next hold. It's not a simple ladder. Climbing requires a vast array of different body motions, or moves. This complexity, he concludes, is what makes the sport so difficult and interesting. His explanation is interrupted by the announcer calling for the next competitor, number 3, Mori Buntaru. Yumi and her friend shout his name with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Hearing the call, Mori instinctively covers his face, overwhelmed by the sudden pressure. At the same time, another figure waits in the stark isolation room. Fukumoto sits hunched on a bench, his face shadowed by a hood, his eyes narrowed into slits of intense, silent focus. The intense moment triggers a memory. A small girl stands at the base of a colossal, strangely angled clock tower, gazing up at its impossible height. The memory continues, showing a young, light-haired boy also staring up at the tower, vowing to climb to higher and higher places. But in the foreground, a menacing, hooded figure watches him, seething with a silent, hateful wish for the boy to hurry up, fall, and disappear. The flashback shatters, returning to the present. Mori stands poised, his gaze directed upward toward the unseen challenge. Just as he is about to move forward, a competition official approaches, holding up a hand to stop him. As Mori prepared for his turn, a discussion unfolded among the spectators. The store manager remarked to Onishi-sensei that it would be fine even if Mori fell, noting the absurdity of sending a beginner up a wall he had intentionally made ridiculously difficult. Nearby, Yumi and her friend watched, wondering about the quiet boy. The manager admitted his role in the route's design, holding onto a sliver of hope that if, by some small chance, Mori succeeded, it would be a true spectacle. Miyamoto, observing from a distance, questioned if this was truly for the best. He seemed to believe that a failure here would finally curb Mori's appetite for danger. The thought concluded with a somber prediction. A fall would drive Mori even deeper into a self-imposed solitude, more so than ever before. His back was turned to the crowd, marked only by the number 3, his official designation for the 13th Seaside Cup. He began his final preparations, pulling the strap on his climbing shoe tight with a sharp tug. Then, he plunged his hand into his chalk bag, coating his palm and fingers in a fine white powder. With his grip prepared, he began his ascent. His body stretched out, a study in focus and tension as he reached for the first distant hold. He moved with an unexpected fluidity, scaling the initial section of the wall. The store manager, who had designed the route, could only stare in utter disbelief. The source of the crowd's impending shock was not just Mori's skill. High above, another climber clung to the wall, looking down with a knowing smirk. A flicker of recognition crossed his face as he watched Mori's approach. "So, it's you," he thought, a sense of inevitability in his gaze. "I knew it." His fingers were clamped onto a hold with practiced ease, his eyes fixed downward with predatory focus. Below, the crowd's astonishment grew vocal. Ishida shouted in disbelief, exclaiming that Mori was climbing faster than the two previous competitors. Yumi watched, speechless. On the wall, Mori's own eyes widened as he looked up, perhaps sensing the presence above him for the first time. The entire gymnasium was now captivated. A sea of faces turned upward, their collective gaze fixed on the drama unfolding on the climbing wall. His mind flashes to a different moment of intense pressure. His face, shadowed by a hood, is a mask of conflict, sweat beading on his temple. He stares at a rattling door, his thoughts racing as he internally demands to know which path to take, which choice is the right one. On the competition wall, Mori Buntaru stretches his body to its limit. With focused eyes, he reaches up, his chalk-dusted fingers finding a secure hold as he continues his ascent. From the crowd, Miyamoto and Yumi watch the eighth climb, named Takatori Mountain. A rival climber observes Mori's technique, noting aloud that he's using high steps to extend his range. The rival's expression is one of intense analysis, finding it unbelievable. He remarks to the shop manager beside him that Mori is executing a difficult sequence without any hesitation. "It looks," he says, "as if it has been rehearsed 100 times. The manager is taken aback, questioning if it's truly rehearsed. The manager concedes that the rival is right again. The rival then explains his theory. Mori has performed an image climb of Takatori over and over in his head, etching the entire correct process into his very being. The manager looks at the young man, a look of understanding dawning on his face as he realizes how the rival knows this. In Mori's mind, the rival's theory is reality. The artificial climbing wall transforms into the rugged, sun-bleached face of the real Takatori rock. This is what he sees before him. His internal monologue confirms it. Every detail is just as he imagined. He knows to grab a specific protrusion, to shove his leg into a particular hole. Everything is unfolding exactly as planned. With his perfect mental map, he ascends the imagined rock face, his movements fluid and certain against the vast, textured stone. Looking down the sheer, sun-kissed cliff of his mind's eye, a quiet understanding settles over him. He knows that with this climb, with this mountain, he understands everything. The profound connection washes over him. A single bead of sweat traces a path down his temple, but his eyes are wide and clear, filled with a newfound, almost spiritual focus. His renewed determination is felt by the crowd below. Yumi and her friends cheer that he's totally awesome, while Ishida shouts in amazement that he just keeps climbing. Onishi-sensei, watching intently, remarks that he's been climbing the real Takatori for 40 years, underscoring the magnitude of Mori's feat. Miyamoto can only watch in silent, simmering frustration as Mori continues his ascent. The wall he so masterfully ascends is a special one, a surface dyed with the blood and sweat from the very dawn of climbing in Japan. Its pockmarked face tells a story, each hole a trace left by pitons driven in over countless years. Watching this display, the climbing shop manager expresses his admiration, noting that it's fitting for such an amazing young climber to be born from the legacy of Takatori. He feels certain that the pioneering climbers of the past will be proud. Meanwhile, another figure watches from the sidelines, his expression hardening as the cheers for Mori continue unabated. A restless energy emanates from him, his foot tapping rhythmically on the floor. High above, the subject of their attention pushes onward, his focus absolute. He sees the peak, just a little further. With grim determination, he resolves to grab it with his outstretched hand. He reaches, his fingers brushing the hold, but suddenly, a look of pure shock crosses his face. His body freezes mid-motion, his eyes widening in disbelief. Below, the safety rope slackens, a clear sign that his ascent has halted. The crowd murmurs in confusion, wondering if he is all right. Yumi, watching intently, questions why he has stopped and why the rope suddenly feels so heavy. The physical toll of his explosive climb is catching up to him. Having exerted so much strength, blood is no longer circulating properly to his arms, starving them of oxygen and energy. Ishida watches in horror, realizing that this was bound to happen. He hangs there, suspended in agony, gritting his teeth against the searing pain in his muscles. He was just a little further from the top, so close to his goal. As his body fails, his mind is thrown back to a dark memory. The flashing lights of an ambulance on a rain-slicked street, a pool of blood on the ground. A desperate voice echoes in his thoughts, asking why he is being pushed away. The memory intensifies, culminating in a single, damning accusation that screams through his consciousness. Murderer. The psychological blow is too much. His grip falters, and his fingers slip from the rock. He plummets from the wall, his body limp in the air. As he falls, a single thought of resignation drifts through his mind. It doesn't really matter. His descent sends a wave of panic through the onlookers. Miyamoto stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend what he's seeing, while Ishida shouts in alarm. Yumi lets out a terrified scream, and even the stoic rival climber is frozen in shock as Mori's fingers finally lose their purchase. But then, with a sudden, powerful clamp, his fall is arrested. Mori's eyes snap open, wide with a stark, renewed focus. His hand, in a display of impossible strength, has latched back onto a hold, stopping his descent completely. On the competition wall, Mori Buntaru executes a powerful move, his fingers digging into a hold. The spectators, including Miyamoto and Yumi, gasp in astonishment. This moment is marked as the ninth climb vision. Elsewhere, another young man with dark, shaggy hair is overcome by a sudden, intense sensation. His foot twitches as he stares at his hand, bewildered. He feels a strange heat, realizing with a shock that all the blood in his body is starting to boil. He feels his own body urging him to climb, as if it were a separate entity. Looking up at a distant, dark precipice, he wonders if it is calling to him. The sensation is so powerful, it seems to resonate with Mori, whose eyes widen in shared shock. Surrendering to the impulse, he declares that he won't hesitate anymore. He begins to ascend a sheer rock face, his body moving with fluid determination in his own ninth climb vision. Back at the gymnasium, Mori is now high up on the impossibly complex climbing wall, a testament to his renewed vigor. His progress astounds the onlookers. Ishida can't believe it, realizing Mori had let his exhausted arms hang down to allow blood to flow back into them. Yumi excitedly tells her friend to look, exclaiming that Mori has started climbing again. Nearby, another teacher asks Onishi-sensei if he taught Mori that recovery method, but the older teacher simply says no. The younger teacher presses further, asking if Takatori Mountain taught him instead. Onishi-sensei grows philosophical, explaining that mountains are fickle. He muses that they can be like a harsh father pushing one away, or, conversely, like a tender mother gently ushering one forward. His words hang over the image of a majestic, snow-capped peak, a silent monument to the countless climbers whose lives have been swayed by the temper of the mountains. High above the gymnasium floor, perched silently on the structural beams, Miyamoto observes the entire scene. He smirks slightly, noting to himself that he can see everything perfectly from his vantage point. The focus returns to the rival climber on the distant cliff. He pants, his body growing hotter and hotter, consumed by the feeling that the mountain itself is calling to him. On the climbing wall, Mori Buntaru looks up, his expression unreadable. Below him, a crucial carabiner on the safety line hangs empty, unclipped. He glances down at the rope, a silent decision forming. Elsewhere, the rival climber looks up from his own position, as if sensing the shift in the air. In a sudden, explosive movement, Mori launches himself sideways across the rock face, completely detached from his safety line. He lands securely on a distant hold, a flicker of irritation crossing his face as he thinks how annoying this all is. Below, Onishi-sensei and the climbing gym manager gasp in utter shock at the reckless maneuver. His eyes widen with manic intensity as he grips the wall, shouting to the world that he can climb alone. The rival climber, miles away, smirks faintly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. A shared vision flashes through their minds, a desperate hand reaching for hold. Mori internally relives the moment, thinking it's the end if he can just stretch his hand. The rival, however, perceives the memory with a thrill, thinking it looks like fun. The vision shatters. High in the rafters above the competition, Miyamoto sits watching, a slight smile on his face. He speaks into the open air, stating he's glad he found Buntaru. Mori's head snaps up, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror. As he stares at Miyamoto's calm face, a name escapes his lips in a choked whisper. Mizuki. The recognition hits him with a jolt, a sharp, painful memory resurfacing. His shock is interrupted by a voice from below. A competition official points up, shouting for player number 3 to stop, declaring him disqualified. In the crowd, Ishida explains to a confused Yumi that Mori didn't put the rope through the carabiner, a clear violation of the rules. Ishida stares, stunned, murmuring that Mori's action was just like. Onishi-sensei finishes the thought, his expression one of grave understanding. For a child like Mori, he observes, leaping up a mountain is the same as abandoning his own life. He hangs upside down, a faint chuckle escaping him. He muses internally that this is what it means to be solo. From his precarious perch on the building's exterior, he dangles over the entrance. Unseen by him, the rival climber who shared his vision watches from a nearby doorway, a smirk playing on his lips as he notes what an interesting person Mori is. His presence has not gone unnoticed. On the ground below, 2 security guards spot him, shouting an alarm and ordering him to get down immediately. Nearby, Miyamoto observes the spectacle with a smug grin, noting that Mori has been discovered. The guards can only stare, mouths agape, as Mori hangs effortlessly from the smooth overhang, his bare feet hooked over the edge. With a single, powerful movement, he swings his body away from the wall, beginning a graceful arc through the air. The rival climber watches the display, turning away as he reflects on his own aversion to crowds. From the crowd, Onishi-sensei recognizes the acrobat as player number 3, Mori, and cries out a warning. But Mori has already landed on the rooftop, a distant figure ignoring the shouts from below that plead for him to wait. The rival climber watches Mori's escape, a confident smile spreading across his face. A sense of understanding, of shared spirit, dawns on him as he concludes that he and Mori would likely get along very well. Mori Bundaru recalls a pivotal moment from a past solo climb. He remembers the instant he threw his rope away, a decision that made everything else in the world simply disappear. In that memory, high on the rock face, he was utterly alone. There was no one else there. It was just him against the vast expanse of Takatori Rock, a true solo climber. Snapping back to the present, Mori looks up, a bead of sweat on his temple. He is certain that in that moment, he was completely alone. His thoughts are shattered by a voice calling him Mizuki and asking why he's standing over there. The speaker muses that it's as if he hasn't been forgiven. Mori turns, bewildered, as a competition announcement calls for the next climber. He stares in wide-eyed shock at the person who addressed him, a confident young man with light-colored hair, standing with his hands in the pockets of his dark hoodie. The face is unmistakable, and Mori's mind reels, silently questioning if this is truly Mizuki. The young man introduces himself as Hara Kento and confirms Mori was the climber wearing number 3. He says he's been looking for him, adding it was a shame he almost made it up Takatori. Before Mori can react, Hara grabs his arm, urging him to hurry. Hara pulls the still confused Mori away by the hand. A young woman with dark hair watches them go with a concerned expression as Mori silently questions where he is being taken. They end up on an empty rooftop. Hara lets go, explaining he just want to get a look inside the venue. He glances back, commenting that those guys are persistent, implying they were being watched. He continued his assessment of Mori, noting that while he was a beginner before, he is now a completely different person. Mori's eyes widen in surprise at the observation. He then probed further, asking how long Mori has been climbing, a month, maybe 2, and remarking that Mori seems to enjoy being alone. Unsettled, Mori turns away, stating he's going home. As Mori walks away, Hara smirks and continues speaking. He muses that Mori only aims for the top, finding the belayers, ropes, and all the little safety precautions to be utterly annoying. Mori stops short at the rooftop exit, startled to see Hara and the young woman standing there. From the doorway, she calls out to him, her expression curious. Hara gestures towards the woman and casually asks Mori if she's his girlfriend, commenting that she's cute. Mori immediately responds with a flat no. In response, the woman asks Mori if Hara is a friend of his. Before an answer can be given, Hara deftly snatches the phone from her hand. She demands her phone back, but he ignores her, calmly typing on it. He announces that he sent his address to her phone and suggests they hang out sometime. He looks at her with a chilling smirk, adding that one should make plans because, after all, you never know when you're going to die. After retrieving her phone, the woman asks Mori who the strange guy is. Mori confirms her assessment. Meanwhile, Hara stands casually on the very edge of the rooftop ledge, remarking that on mountains, it isn't strange to fall and die at any time. Her face contorts in terror as she looks up at him. She screams that they're on the 6th floor and that a fall would be fatal, desperately asking what he thinks he's doing. She panics, urging Mori to do something, screaming that the young man on the ledge is going to fall. Mori watches intently, his feet shifting on the rooftop as he internally compares the narrowing concrete edge to a weakened ice ridge. As if on cue, the edge beneath Hara Kento's foot crumbles. He suddenly pitches backward, arms flailing as he plummets from the roof. The sight sends a jolt of shock through Mori, his eye widening in disbelief. Beside him, the young woman lets out a piercing scream of terror. While falling, however, Hara's expression is not one of fear. He spreads his arms wide, an unnerving calm on his face as he looks up towards the sky. In a split-second reaction, Mori lunges, his hand shooting out to snatch Hara's wrist and arrest his fall. From below, Hara looks up and asks why Mori helped him. His expression twists into a manic glare. He shouts up at Mori that he doesn't remember entrusting his life to him, declaring that right now, he is climbing an ice ridge in the Himalayas, all alone. Mori stares down, processing the bizarre statement. Hara's philosophy becomes clear: climb alone, die alone. Mori retorts that if Hara truly wants to climb alone, then he shouldn't intervene in other people's lives. A smirk spreads across Hara's face. He reveals his other hand, already gripping the ledge securely. He was never truly falling. This, he declares, is what it means to be a solo climber. Mori's eyes widen in stunned realization. With a triumphant scream, Hara stands back on the roof, the image of wings on his hoodie now visible. Mori stares, his mind reeling from the deception as his own hand clenches the concrete ledge. He effortlessly pulls himself up, looking down at Mori with open disappointment. He states that he thought Mori, of all people, would be able to understand what it means to be truly solo. Mori is left speechless, grappling with the manipulative lesson. The pursuit culminates in chaos. As Mori Buntaru hangs precariously from the school's roof ledge, Miyamoto, in his reckless chase, crashes through a window below, shattering glass and his own momentum. From another window, a young woman watches in horror, shocked that he survived the fall. Below, having landed safely, Mori stands alone, head bowed. The word echoes in his mind, solo. He makes his way to the rooftop, standing at the edge in quiet contemplation. The young woman, now on the roof with him, frantically tries to call for a teacher, her phone refusing to connect. Her panic goes unnoticed. Mori is lost in a memory, a voice suggesting he doesn't need a rope or a belayer. Just climb by yourself. He wonders if he can truly do that. Later, he is approached by the climbing shop manager, who greets him with a simple yo. The manager states that he saw Mori's climb, while Harakinto adds that for a first time, he did pretty well. Mori turns away, stating he's going home. The manager's expression hardens. He warns Mori that he mustn't throw the rope away like that, calling it a complete act of suicide. He then begins a story, explaining that a long time ago, he too had a comrade who wanted to run solo. He reminisces about the past, a constrained era of high economic growth where climbers sought freedom from societal obligation in the mountains. His tale continues, focusing on their goal in January of 1967, the midwinter Takizawa third slab. It was said to be Japan's most difficult, unclimbable ice wall, and they believed conquering it would make them famous. In a flashback, a younger, brasher version of the manager shouts up the ice face. He tells his partner, Ijima, that he'll be the first to the top and promises to pull him up too. His triumphant declaration is cut short. A drop of moisture hits his cheek, and his confident expression falters into confusion. The view pulls back, revealing the two small figures dwarfed by the immense, treacherous ice wall. He continues his story, recalling the brutal conditions on Mount Tanagawa, a place where Pacific and Sea of Japan air currents collide to create some of the most violent weather in the world. In his memory, a sudden, explosive avalanche of snow and ice cascades down the face of the mountain. Caught in the aftermath, his younger self screams for his partner, his senpai. He looks up to see the man dangling precariously from the safety rope, high above him on the ice wall. A voice shouts down, reassuring him. His partner, Ijima, explains that he was positioned beneath an overhang and managed to avoid being swept away by the main force of the avalanche. The young manager, relieved but still shaken, asks if he is truly okay. Ijima's tone turns grim. He admits that he lost his ice axe in the chaos. With a look of intense frustration, he declares that it's now impossible for him to continue the climb. Confused, the young manager asks what's wrong. All right then, it's your turn now. Ijima shouts from above, asking his partner to lower him to a safe point below. As the manager's voice narrates this moment, Mori listens with rapt attention, his expression unreadable. The climbing rope uncoils, dropping through the air. The young manager looks up in disbelief, calling out Ijima's name again. But instead of descending, his partner begins climbing upward, continuing the ascent alone. He screams at his partner, calling him an idiot. He reminds him that climbing alone, without a rope, is an act of suicide and begs him to come back. But Ijima, his face a mask of grim resolve, shouts back that he is going on alone, convinced that if he lets this chance slip away, he will regret it for the rest of his life. His desperation turns to fury. Are you not listening to your senpai? He roars, his voice echoing across the ice. This is an order. Come back. But his pleas are swallowed by the mountain. Ijima disappears into the swirling fog and snow. The manager's narration concludes this part of the memory, stating that the next time they met was 3 years later. The scene shifts to a deep ravine filled with perennial snow. There, the young manager, having finally located something, shouts out into the desolate landscape. I found him. He has discovered a form, partially buried in the snow. He concludes his story, his mind replaying the image of his partner falling. He laments Ijima's foolishness, questioning why he had to be so rash. The manager explains that while he survived because he was tied by a rope, Ijima, who cut the rope to climb solo, died. He looks at Mori, emphasizing that with no one to save you or watch over you, you die alone. His gaze intensifies as he delivers his final, crucial point. A person who cuts their ties with others, he insists, is a person who cannot live. He pleads with Mori to understand this and to never let go of the rope. Despite the impassioned warning, Mori remains unmoved. He admits that he still doesn't understand. He questions the manager about Ijima, asking why his death had to be so meaningless and why he would commit such a reckless act in the first place. He then offers his own stark interpretation. Ijima was able to climb alone. The words strike the manager with force, his eyes widening in disbelief at such a perspective. Mori's statement triggers a powerful memory. The manager sees the face of Ijima, frozen in the snow, and has a shocking realization. The expression is the same one he sees on Mori's face now. The parallel leaves him stunned. As he processes this, Mori turns to leave, stating he's going home and declining the manager's proposition. The manager calls out, protesting that their talk isn't over and urging Mori to join the Alpine Club he chairs, Team Baltoro. He glances back over his shoulder, his expression one of clear annoyance. Whether it's climbing up or down, he dismisses the entire topic as irritating. The manager can only watch, his face a mask of frustration. His words strike the manager down, who collapses to his knees. He wonders if he was the one who couldn't throw off his own fetters. As Mori bids him a quiet bye and walks away, the manager mutters in denial. unable to accept it. As he kneels in defeat, his mind flashes back to Ijima one last time. A new, painful understanding dawns on him. He mentally asks his fallen friend if all he ever wanted was simply to climb alone. He clenches his fist, correcting his own thought. No, it would have been useless even if he had tried to stop him. He realizes with resignation that once again, he was powerless to stop anyone. He watches Mori's retreating figure, knowing that wherever he goes alone. He walks away, his decision made. A single, defining thought solidifies in his mind, a principle to live by: be alone. At the climbing competition venue, Onishi-sensei calls out to a coach while Yumi looks on, wondering where Mori has gone. Nearby, with his back to the event, the climber Harakento stands alone, gazing out at the city skyline. The announcer's voice echoes, declaring the start of the next attempt. It is now player number 18, Miyamoto, who will begin his climb. He stands poised and muscular, glaring forward with intense determination. Before starting, he looks up at the towering wall, his eyes scanning the chalk marks left behind. Damn, he mutters, his face contorted with frustration as he wonders just how far his rival, Mori, managed to climb. The image of Mori's climb flashes in his mind, a dynamic, almost frantic ascent. Mori had launched himself up the wall with explosive power, his eyes wide with a wild, focused energy. Fueled by this vision, Miyamoto begins his own climb. His hands dig into the holds as he internally vows to be faster than Mori, determined to be the one to reach the very top. He moves with astonishing speed. From the crowd, a spectator gasps in amazement, pointing out how fast he is and that he has already climbed a significant distance up the wall. As Miyamoto powers upward, two observers discuss his frantic pace. The spiky-haired teacher remarks that Miyamoto is clearly rushing, his mind fixated on Mori's performance. His companion clarifies that it's a competition rule. Climbers don't learn the previous records until their own turn is over. Meanwhile, far from the wall and the eyes of the crowd, Mori Bunno walks silently through a corridor. His face is a mask of indifference as he makes his way out of the venue. His exit is cut short when the coach grabs his arm, stopping him. The match isn't over yet, the coach insists, demanding to know where Mori is going. Mori turns, his expression cold and distant. As Yumi calls his name with concern, he bluntly states that he doesn't care and is going home. The coach tightens his grip, delivering a sharp ultimatum. If he leaves now, he will never be able to go higher than a climber named Takatori. He stands frozen, his eyes wide with shock. Beside him, Yumi looks up at the climbing wall and murmurs Miyamoto's name in disbelief. Her gaze is fixed high above, where Miyamoto clings to a severe overhang, a solitary figure dwarfed by the immense structure as a crowd watches from the floor below. The coach standing with him explains that from this point forward, Miyamoto is facing a world-class wall, a route graded 5.13. Yumi, her face etched with worry, asks if her upperclassmen will be okay. To illustrate the difficulty, the coach holds up 2 sticks of gum, noting that a 5.13 grade on a vertical wall has holds that thin, and this is even harder. Nearby, Harakento casually offers Yumi a piece of gum. He continues, explaining that as a climber ascends, the number of holds dwindles to just a few. This, he stresses, is the world-class battle Miyamoto is fighting. Mori listens, thinking to himself that it seems impossible. High on the overhang, Miyamoto feels the immense strain. He realizes this is a completely different challenge from the vertical section. His entire body weight is now hanging from his fingertips. His grip gives way. With a furious vow to blast through, Miyamoto's hand slips from the hold. As he plummets, a gasp ripples through the crowd below. Mori watches, his expression unreadable. The fall is arrested by his safety rope. Miyamoto dangles in the air, letting out a grunt of pure frustration. From the sidelines, the coach explains that Miyamoto had stopped to use a knee bar, a technique to lock in his leg, allowing him to rest his arms. In the crowd, Harakento remarks on the awesome move as Mori's eyes narrow, absorbing the tactical lesson. As an image of Miyamoto straining in the knee bar flashes by, the coach turns directly to Mori. He tells him that he, too, must master such techniques. Only then, he insists, will he be able to go higher. High on the climbing wall, Miyamoto grits his teeth, realizing the situation is dire. He knows he must complete the route in a single, continuous burst of effort. As he continues his ascent, an image of Yumi fills his mind. He calls out her name internally, pleading for strength and vowing that no one will climb higher than him. His desperation is fueled by the sight of Mori climbing just beside him, nearly matching his height on the wall. Miyamoto stretches his body to its absolute limit, his fingers reaching for a hold just beyond his rival's grasp. With a raw, guttural scream, he lunges for the distant hold, his face contorted in a mask of pure, agonizing effort. His fingertips brush against the hold, but fail to find purchase. As he plummets, his eyes widen in disbelief. Mori has vanished from his side, only to be seen still clinging to the wall above. "You bastard!" Miyamoto seethes. From the crowd, Ishida erupts with excitement, shouting that Mori's on-site climb was awesome. Beside him, Harakento is speechless, his expression a mixture of shock and admiration. At the top of the route, Mori himself looks slightly bewildered by his own success. Nearby, The coach speaks urgently with the concerned Onishi-sensei. He explains that Mori is now unstoppable and will proceed alone even if someone tries to stop him. He insists that Onishi-sensei is the only one who can fulfill the duty of watching over the boy. The coach's expression hardens into one of grim resolve. He declares that as a teacher and a climber, he will sacrifice his own body to protect Mori's life. Within earshot, Mori overhears the solemn vow, his eyes widening in absolute shock. At Yokosuka North High School, a newspaper is passed around, its headlines celebrating a local student's victory. The article details how Miyamoto Hajime, a third year, was the sole climber to conquer the wall at the 13th Seaside Cup, earning him a spot in the All-Japan tournament. A student's voice urges others to take a look. Miyamoto himself leans back with a smug expression, dismissing the accomplishment as nothing big. He boasts that, of course, he would achieve something like that just by entering. His classmates swarm his desk, eager to see the article. Ishida remarks on the irony of the most hated guy in class suddenly becoming a hero. Others express their disbelief, clamoring for a look. Miyamoto agrees, noting that this victory suddenly makes up for everything. Across the room, Mori Buntaru ignores the commotion, his head resting on his desk. Yumi watches him with concern, thinking to herself that while Miyamoto was impressive, Mori's performance was also amazing, especially considering it was his first time and he ranked so high. She calls out his name, but Mori simply rises from his seat and walks out of the classroom without acknowledging her, his back turned to the entire scene. As he leaves, Miyamoto looks at the newspaper photo of Mori and scoffs, pointing out that Mori only just cleared his first 5.13 wall. Ishida chimes in, suggesting Mori looks embarrassed in the photo because he got himself disqualified. Yumi, overhearing their mockery, sharply tells them to leave him alone. Meanwhile, in the faculty office, a teacher with spiky hair reviews a file. He asks a colleague if they can try contacting a student named Mori Buntaru, then asks to be directed to his homeroom teacher from the previous year. The teacher approaches Onishi-sensei, confirming he's the one he needs to speak with. He then muses aloud about Mori, wondering if the reason he is so obsessed with being alone stems from a past event that caused him to shut his heart away. Onishi-sensei hesitantly confirms he is the vice principal and that this is about the matter from yesterday. The other teacher acknowledges that Onishi has caused problems, but states his belief that Onishi was once a teacher with real leadership qualities. Satisfied, the spiky-haired teacher thanks Onishi profusely and takes charge, declaring he will contact the principal himself and that Onishi can leave the matter to him. He turns and walks away, leaving a stunned Onishi-sensei behind in the office. Inside the classroom, Miyamoto approaches Mori's desk, calling out for him to wait. Mori, looking away with his back partially turned, dismisses him, stating he doesn't want to talk. Miyamoto persists, asking what's wrong. Resolved, Miyamoto thinks to himself that he must speak with Mori. He scans the now empty classroom, realizing Mori isn't there either. A glance out the window reveals the reason. Mori is sitting alone on the ground at the base of an external metal staircase. He watches from above, wondering what on earth Mori is doing. Down below, Mori sits lost in thought, fixated on the staircase. He internally laments that no matter how hard he tries, he can't get past a certain point, even though he can reach the 12th stair. His frustration peaks. Staring up at the structure, Mori questions how he can possibly jump as high as his rival. In a sudden burst of determination, he leaps, grabbing onto the underside of the staircase and beginning to climb it, as if it were a steep overhang. He hangs from the metal frame, his body tense with effort as he pulls himself upward, straining to reach for the next hold. Suddenly, his grip fails. His hand slips from the smooth metal edge, scraping his palm raw. A look of pure shock crosses Mori's face as he begins to fall, an expression mirrored by Miyamoto, who watches in alarm from the building. As he plummets, Miyamoto lunges and catches him, breaking his fall. Mori is left stunned, suspended in his rival's grasp, his own eyes wide with disbelief. Before either can process the moment, a new voice interjects. A young man with light, shoulder-length hair, Harakento, appears, admonishing Mori. He calls him an idiot for practicing lunges without a harness, declaring his approach to be naive. Miyamoto continues to hold Mori as they both stare at the newcomer. His critique turns into instruction. Hara tells Mori to get his hips far away from the wall and lower them to successfully make the move. He correctly identifies that Mori was practicing an emergency lunge and astutely observes that Mori must be truly addicted to climbing. Mori listens, surprised by the accurate analysis. Miyamoto, infuriated by the interruption, scratches his head in annoyance and shouts that he was the one who said he'd teach Mori. Ignoring him completely, Hara tells Mori to go ahead and try the jump again, offering to watch from below. Mori can only look on, confused by the sudden clash of would-be mentors. He stood frozen as Miyamoto's voice boomed, his face contorted with intense emotion. Miyamoto confessed that the only reason he had finally cleared a difficult 5.13 grade wall the day before was because he was driven by the singular thought of not wanting to lose to Mori. His challenge was a roar, demanding that Mori catch up to him, to climb higher, and to finally surprise him. He pressed further, questioning if Mori also wanted to go higher, and ordering him to hurry up and jump. The words struck Mori, whose eyes widened in stunned silence. Instead of rising to the challenge, Mori looked down and quietly muttered an apology. The unexpected response left Miyamoto utterly baffled. From a distance, the spiky-haired teacher observed the scene. He noted how pathetic Mori looked, then called out instructions, telling him to store up as much energy as he could before jumping and reaching out as far as possible. The teacher continued his critique, calling Mori's earlier attempt pathetic. He then shouted for Unishi-sensei to come look, urging Mori to stop grumbling and just climb. He commanded Mori to jump again with everything he had. As Mori looked up, the faintest hint of a smile touched his lips, a reaction that caught the teacher by surprise, who wondered how Mori could possibly be smiling at a time like this. Suddenly, the teacher began running towards them, shouting that he had something important to tell them. His approach startled both Mori and Miyamoto, who turned to face him. He announced with unrestrained excitement that he had just received official approval to start a climbing club. Not only that, but they would even get a climbing wall in the gymnasium, a place where they could practice all they wanted. Mori and Miyamoto stared in stunned silence. Elsewhere, a note sat on a desk for Unishi-sensei, informing him of a call from another high school regarding the Mori Buntaru case. Outside the school building, a crowd of students murmurs in disbelief. Miyamoto and his friend Ishida stare forward, with Ishida convinced it must be a dream. Nearby, Yumi and her friends point, wondering what has appeared before them. The object of their awe is a massive, custom-built climbing wall, complete with a variety of holds, now standing on school grounds. Miyamoto proudly announces that it is their own private wall. A banner at its base reads, 14th climb, personal limitations. In response to the reveal, Yumi turns to Miyamoto, impressed, realizing it's for a climbing club. He dismisses her praise with a casual shrug. Ishida, however, is ecstatic, shouting that they can now practice at school to their heart's content and giving all the credit to Miyamoto. While Ishida continues to celebrate, Mori Buntaru approaches the new structure. He quietly reaches out, his fingertips brushing against the textured surface of a climbing hold, his expression distant and focused. Seeing him there, Miyamoto approaches and asks if he's going to join the climbing club too. Mori looks away, stating he's not good with club activities. Miyamoto calls him a pain, but points out that with this private wall, he can now climb without reserve. He leans in, his expression intense. He tells Mori this is much better than the emergency stairs they used before and challenges him to keep lunging. Mori meets his gaze, a silent intensity passing between them. With a final, shouted command for Mori to decide, Miyamoto watches as Mori throws himself at the wall, beginning a powerful lunging exercise from one hold to the next. Watching from the side, Ishida remarks to Yumi that the two of them suddenly practicing lunges together is giving him the creeps. Yumi simply watches with a thoughtful look. On the wall, Mori loses his footing and tumbles onto the crash pad below, shouting in frustration. Following his fall, Yumi approaches Mori. She asks if he's part of the climbing club. Before he can answer, other students gather around, excitedly asking if they can join too, saying it looks like fun. Yumi smiles, agreeing that it looks fun. Her focus then shifts, and she turns to Ishida, asking for the whereabouts of Fukumoto and Unishi-sensei. Ishida says he doesn't know, only that Fukumoto had something important to do. Flustered, Yumi quickly clarifies that she isn't the club manager. At Yokosuka East High School, a man with intense eyes and spiky dark hair adjusts his tie. He stands before the reception office, contemplating the news he has just received. Mori Buntaru has entered a climbing tournament. He enters an office to speak with Unishi-sensei, asking directly if something significant happened involving Mori at this school. Unishi, his expression troubled, begins to hesitantly reveal a difficult story. Seated across from the visitor, Unishi-sensei voices the shocking rumor with disbelief, stating that Mori drove a classmate to suicide. He quickly clarifies that this is not the whole truth. Mori had merely been present at the location where the classmate attempted suicide. However, because Mori never spoke about the situation, rumors began to spread throughout the school, and he was ostracized as if he were somehow connected to the act. Unishi elaborates that Mori was naturally a quiet person, which led others to see him as creepy, making the rumors seem more plausible. He concludes that the stories might not be entirely wrong in spirit, given the perception of him. Having heard the story, the visitor stands abruptly. With a terse, "Excuse me," he turns to leave the office, his face a mask of stern contemplation. As he moves toward the door, a loud crash echoes from outside the school building, startling both him and Unishi-sensei. The commotion is in a training area, where Miyamoto is berating an utterly exhausted Mori, who has collapsed onto a mat. Miyamoto's friends urge him to stop, pointing out that Mori's legs are spent. Nearby, Yumi and her friend watch with worried expressions as Mori's hand trembles with fatigue. Despite his body giving out, Mori's spirit remains unbroken. He thinks to himself that he can still grip a little longer. From a doorway, the coach who had been speaking with Unishi now watches, his gaze fixed on Mori's incredible persistence. Miyamoto, frustrated, demands to know how many more jumps Mori needs to do to be satisfied. In that moment, a stray basketball hurtles through the air, aimed directly at an oblivious Yumi. As a friend shouts a panicked warning, Mori explodes into motion from the floor, lunging to shove her out of the path of danger. He had deflected the basketball just in time, sending it smacking against the wall behind Yumi. The coach watches the entire exchange with a sharp, focused gaze. He stares at his hand, a flicker of surprise in his eyes as the basketball bounces away. Nearby, Miyamoto and his friend shout at the other student to watch out, who quickly apologizes for the stray ball. Sometime later, inside a climbing gym, the coach stands before Mori and Yumi. Miyamoto and his friends are also present. The coach addresses Mori directly, challenging him to try and perform that same move again. On the wall, Mori reaches for a distant hold on a steep overhang. He stretches his body to its absolute limit, his fingers straining for a grip that seems just out of his grasp. Below, his face is a mask of intense concentration. With a final, desperate lunge, his hand slaps firmly onto the hold. He made it. From the ground, Miyamoto and his friend can only stare in disbelief, exclaiming that he actually succeeded. Now standing before the coach, Mori listens as his performance is analyzed. The coach explains that he was too conscious of the hold, causing his body to strain and preventing his arms from extending fully. In the background, Miyamoto and Ishida express their amazement, wondering how Mori managed the move after failing before. He continues his analysis, telling Mori that if he truly wants to go higher, he must not decide on his own limits. In other words, Mori had unconsciously created a psychological barrier for himself. The words strike Mori, whose eyes widen in realization. The coach's voice grows more intense. He declares that the person who just climbed that overhang is a new you. He passionately urges Mori to climb higher, to seek out this new version of himself. His words hang in the air as he concludes that what happened in the past is not the problem. The real question, he insists, is how to live on from here. As Mori processes this profound advice, the coach grabs the collar of his own shirt, a sense of purpose in his eyes. With that, the coach turns back to the wall and the assembled students. He announces that he's going to teach Mori a new technique and begins to unbutton his shirt, preparing for a demonstration. The day begins at the Mori residence. On a kitchen table, a prepared breakfast of a fried egg and salad sits beside a note addressed to Buntaru from his mother, stating she has left for work early. Inside, a pair of hands grips the top edge of a doorframe, knuckles straining. The effort is palpable before the view shifts to an empty, quiet staircase. The hands belong to Mori Buntaru, who hangs from the frame in a school uniform, attempting a pull-up. His body is taut with exertion. He grits his teeth, straining for another moment before his grip gives way. He drops to the floor with a thud, then slumps over his desk in frustration, acknowledging to himself that it's no use. His expression hardens with intense, internal turmoil. He feels as though he will explode if he doesn't start something, yet he feels completely powerless, unable to do anything. Later, at school, Onishi-sensei calls his class to order for homeroom. He reminds the students to turn in the career path questionnaires that he had distributed the day before. The teacher's attention falls on Mori, who has submitted a blank form. Onishi-sensei confronts him, asking what he could possibly be thinking. Mori quietly states there is nothing he wants to do. Exasperated, the teacher insists it's not a final decision and tells him to just write higher education or employment and resubmit it before shouting for Miyamoto. Sighing, Onishi-sensei resigns himself to the fact that the issue is out of his hands. His gaze then drifts over to Fukumoto, who is sound asleep and drooling on his desk. At a climbing gym, Miyamoto chats with others, remarking that the situation is depressing. He mentions writing higher education on his form for now, but admits he's just killing time before he can play more. He then turns to Yumi, asking what she wrote for her career path. Mori, also at the gym, overhears this. He reflects that while he is climbing, he doesn't know where to start. His gaze lands on Fukumoto, who is also present. Mori takes a step and calls out his name. He listened as Fukumoto detailed the necessary equipment: a harness, a chalk bag, an ATC for belaying, plus locking carabiners and slings. The total, Fukumoto estimated, would be around 20,000 yen. The figure left Mori speechless. As he stood there, his classmates Ishida and Yumi watched from the climbing mats. Ishida pointed out that climbing costs money and asked if Mori had a part-time job, questioning if he didn't want other things like clothes or games. Mori, caught off guard, admitted that he had never worked a day in his life. The realization seemed to weigh on him. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the climbing gym, leaving his classmates behind. Watching him go, Yumi remarked that Mori seemed to have changed, even talking to someone on his own initiative. Ishida loudly agreed, saying that while he always thought Mori was a weirdo, he now seemed to be a huge mass of want. As he walked, Mori reflected internally that, until now, he had never truly wanted anything. With this new purpose, the world around him came into a different focus. He noticed a help wanted sign in a shop window, advertising part-time jobs for students with flexible hours. He walked down the street, lost in thought, passing his teacher, Onishi-sensei, without even registering his presence. The idea of getting a job, however, felt impossible to him. As he contemplated this, a loud, sudden shout of his name, Mori, ripped through the air, startling him completely. He looked up to find a man in full winter climbing gear, helmet, jacket, and harness, dangling from a rope directly in his path, having just rappelled down from above. The climber flashed a wide, manic grin, his eyes alight with energy as he shouted a greeting down at the stunned Mori. Before Mori could process the situation, the man swung forward and grabbed him firmly by the shoulders. "You leave yourself way too open," the climber laughed, as Mori flinched back in shock, demanding to know what he was doing. He stared up at the building, still held by the mysterious climber. The man explained that his job was cleaning windows, clarifying that for smaller buildings like this one, they work by rappelling down on a rope from the top, rather than using a gondola. The climber continued, listing the benefits with a confident air. The job provided proper safety insurance, served as excellent rope work training, and he added, the pay for jobs in this area was better. Mori, still bewildered, asked why he was cleaning windows. The climber smirked as if the answer were obvious. It was all for climbing. He then revealed his ultimate goal was in France, a statement that left Mori speechless. His gaze turned distant, fixed on that far-off ambition. He specified his destination, a rocky area in a place called Sus in France. Mori's eyes widened, the scale of the man's dream beginning to dawn on him. A vision of the place filled the mind's eye. Sus, a colossal cliff face whose peaks held a lineup of notoriously difficult routes, placing it in the top class of climbing destinations worldwide. The climber's hand, marked with a crescent moon, clenched into a determined fist. He laid out his plan. After leaving high school, he would set up camp at the base of Sus and spend months conquering every single route. His ultimate dream was to tackle the great 5.15 A route known as Realization, the world's most difficult. He intended to be the first to conquer it on site, in one continuous attempt. His passionate declaration finished, the climber turned to Mori with a wide, expectant grin. He asked for his opinion, boasting that such a plan was 20 times cooler than just going to college. Mori could only stare back, utterly stunned. Finding his voice, Mori stated flatly that the climber wouldn't be able to take on any rocks with his thin body, advising him to build muscle first. The climber's smile vanished. He dismissed the thought, saying it would never happen and telling Mori to forget it. With a quick "see ya," the man turned to leave. At that moment, a voice from the building above shouted, "Hey Miyamoto, don't just stand around." The climber looked up and replied, I'm coming." The name struck Mori with the force of a physical blow. The ambitious climber was his rival, Miyamoto. He walks through the night, the revelation about Miyamoto echoing in his mind. He finds it amazing that his rival would conceive of such a grand plan, the thought consuming him as he passes a job posting for a moving company. His steps pivot with newfound purpose. Soon after, he stands outside the moving center, where a coworker thanks him for his hard work at the end of his shift. As the other workers finish up, one tells him that's enough for the day. Another calls out to the newbie, urging him to take a break, but Mori remains still, a solitary figure against the backdrop of the city night. Elsewhere, Miyamoto and Ishida watch him. Ishida remarks that Mori is a strange person. Miyamoto agrees, noting that Mori refuses to take breaks and even shuns the elevator, choosing to take the stairs instead. As he ascends, Mori reflects on his own uncertainty. He doesn't know which path to take, but for now, he resolves to simply move forward one step at a time. The box is incredibly heavy, and he grunts with the effort of hauling it up the seemingly endless flights of stairs. Every step is a struggle, a physical manifestation of his internal drive to climb ever higher. A young woman with long, dark hair stands on a nearly empty bus, holding a handrail as she gazes out the window. She wears a school uniform, a backpack slung over her shoulder, her expression thoughtful during the quiet journey. Soon, a dark car speeds along a coastal highway, heading towards a distant, mountainous horizon under a bright sky. Inside the vehicle, a group of climbers travels together. The coach drives, with Harakinto in the passenger seat. In the back, Mori Bundaru sits quietly by the window, while Miyamoto leans back with a smug expression, and Ishida plays a harmonica. The young woman, Shirai, is seated between them. Miyamoto boasts that this trip is a great way to use the club's funds. The coach, keeping his eyes on the road, agrees that it's like a real club activity and thanks Shirai, noting her taking the club manager job was a huge help. Miyamoto quickly interjects that it's all thanks to him. As they continue, Shirai excitedly points out the window, having spotted their destination. She thinks to herself that the mountain is awesome. Mori glances over at her. Meanwhile, the coach comments to Hara that Miyamoto is quite impressive and likely has a good chance of going pro. The mountain they approach is Mount Futego. It stands at an elevation of 1165 meters, its ridges containing numerous climbing routes. It is known for having Japan's largest free climbing area, as well as the country's most difficult current route. Having arrived at the base of the towering rock formations, the coach announces that they have made it and indicates their starting point. He gathers the group and instructs them to get set up, explaining that they will be sticking to fundamentals for the day. Miyamoto immediately objects, shouting in disbelief that this is a beginner's course and demanding they take on a higher class route. The coach calmly reminds him not to be stupid, pointing out that the beginner, Mori, is with them. Ignoring the outburst, the climbers begin their preparations. Ishida adjusts his harness, and Mori quietly changes into his climbing shoes. A pile of ropes, carabiners, and other gear lies ready on the ground. The coach then assigns tasks, telling Miyamoto to go up with Shirai and teach her how to fix a top rope. Miyamoto is stunned, questioning why he has to go on a simple hiking course. In response, the coach leans in close, his expression intense, and reminds Miyamoto that they are rope partners and that he knows all sorts of things about him. He tells him to be thankful for the easy task, leaving Miyamoto blushing and speechless. He remarks to Shirai that the hiking course is quite steep. Flustered but determined, she thanks him, securing her helmet with a click. Meanwhile, Mori is already scaling the rock face with startling speed. From the ground, Ishida comments on how fast he is, and Miyamoto notes that Mori has taken the lead. The coach observes Mori's raw talent, comparing him to a gifted amateur, before ordering the rope to be secured for the next climber. From the ground, Miyamoto shouts up to him, asking how the view is and remarking how different it must be from climbing indoors. High on the cliffside, Mori simply looks up, taking in the open expanse. The view from the cliff is vast, with a lone bird soaring freely against the backdrop of a wide, cloud-filled sky. Down below, Miyamoto tilts his head back, feeling the sun on his face. He feels a sense of peace, as if he is melting into the sky itself. High above, Mori looks down from the rock face, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. Elsewhere on the trail, Shirai struggles to keep pace, calling out to Miyamoto that he is moving too fast. Annoyed, he glances back and urges her to hurry up. He reaches back, pulling her up by the hand. After the short scramble, Miyamoto suggests they take a rest, while Harakinto watches them silently from a nearby rock. As they rest, Shirai congratulates Miyamoto on his tournament win. She then pivots the conversation, confirming his plans to go to France after graduation. Miyamoto defensively asks what it is to her. Shirai confesses that she thinks college would be boring and then asks, with startling directness, if she could go with him to France. Her question leaves him utterly stunned. He reacts with fury to Shirai's proposition, shouting that she's being stupid. He insists this isn't a game, painting a grim picture of a life in France spent in tents on a meager budget, with no guarantee of even coming back alive. As Miyamoto fumes, Hara Kinto listens from the side, his expression unreadable but attentive. Shirai, however, presses on, trying to explain that what she truly wants to say is about her feelings for him. Their exchange escalates. Miyamoto scoffs, accusing her of only thinking about superficial things like shopping for brand-name items. Enraged by his dismissiveness, Shirai retorts for him to just go die. As Mori Bundaru walks away from the tense scene, Miyamoto coldly tells her to do as she pleases. Having fled the confrontation, Shirai finds herself lost in a dense, darkening forest. She realizes with a jolt that she doesn't recognize the path, muttering in frustration that Miyamoto is an idiot who really infuriates her. A wave of panic hits her as she decides she must turn back. Suddenly, a sharp scream echoes as her foot slips on the uneven ground. From a distance, Miyamoto's head snaps around, alerted by the cry. The scene abruptly shifts, revealing the fall was not Shirai's. Instead, it is Mori Bundaru, tumbling down a sheer rock face as his friend Ishida watches from below in absolute shock. However, this is merely a training exercise. Mori is safely harnessed on a climbing wall, practicing controlled falls. Ishida, looking up at him, complains to their coach, asking how many more times they have to repeat this drill. The coach patiently explains the purpose of the repetition. He states that while danger is part of the mountain, it isn't the goal. To climb safely, one must first master the feeling of falling, knowing the correct posture and how to react with any type of protection. Those who haven't mastered these basics cannot enter a mountain. He then orders them to practice one more time. Returning to the present, Miyamoto searches frantically through the woods, screaming for an answer. His panic grows until his eyes land on a path forced through a thicket, realizing with dread that she must have gone that way. A desperate, echoing shout for Yumi rings out across the vast mountainside. At that exact moment, the coach's phone buzzes. He answers to find a frantic Miyamoto on the line. His face is a mask of pure panic, sweat beading on his brow as he clutches his phone. In a strained, desperate voice, he reports to Onishi-san that he has lost track of Yumi. His eyes are wide with terror as he adds the horrifying possibility that she might have slid down somewhere on the treacherous terrain. A frantic phone call shatters the calm. Miyamoto's face is contorted with panic as he shouts that he's lost track of Yumi, fearing she has fallen somewhere. Elsewhere, Mori Bundaru's expression is grim as he takes in the scene, a steep cliff face. The situation is dire, labeled as the 17th climb, falling accident. The victim of the accident lies sprawled on a slope of loose rock. It is Shirai, her body still and twisted at an unnatural angle, apparently unconscious from the fall. Miyamoto quickly takes charge, informing his friends that Yumi-chan is down and that Fukumoto also seems to have had an accident. He declares his intention to climb the central route himself, ordering everyone else, especially Mori, to stand by and not act on their own. Mori listens in silence, his gaze fixed and intense. Ignoring Miyamoto's direct order, Mori turns and walks decisively away from the group. He heads straight for the base of the massive rock formation, glancing back only once with a look of unshakable resolve. As he nears the cliff's edge, his eyes fall upon a discarded climbing helmet lying on the rocks. He looks up at the sheer, intimidating face of the cliff, a flicker of alarm crossing his features. His alarm is warranted. Far below, Shirai's unconscious form begins to shift, her body starting an ominous slide down the unstable scree slope. Mori's eyes widen in stunned recognition. "S.H. Shirai?" he whispers. The immediate danger becomes terrifyingly clear to him. In her current state, she is helpless and will slide all the way down. His shock instantly hardens into determination. With a focused glare, Mori turns back to the rock wall and, without hesitation, begins to climb. His hand grips a precarious hold on the rock face. A single, desperate thought flashes through his mind. Maybe I can make it. He scales the cliff, a lone figure moving up the vast expanse of stone. Far below, Miyamoto peers through binoculars, completely unaware. He remarks to someone off-panel that there's nothing but scenery to see and that they should reach a peak soon. Elsewhere on Futego Mountain, a journalist stands with his arms outstretched, taking in the view. He remarks to his companion that mountains are nice, reminiscing about climbing here frequently during his college mountaineering club days. His companion, a photographer, agrees. The journalist explains that their editor-in-chief wanted some soothing pages for the magazine, and notes that he's sure there wasn't a route like this 20 years ago. As he looks through his binoculars, his casual demeanor vanishes. He spotted someone climbing. Through the lenses, he sees the lone figure of Mori scaling the sheer rock face. The journalist realizes with a jolt that the climber has no rope attached. He's free soloing. The photographer, Takeda, asks if the climber is just some reckless idiot or an established climber attempting a kamikaze-style attack. The senior journalist, sensing a story, tells Takeda to start taking photos from a distance. He then asks if Takeda can get a clear view of the climber's face. As Takeda focuses his camera, the senior journalist shouts a warning not to take his eyes off the climber, predicting he might fall. His own eyes widen in disbelief as he watches Mori move onto a treacherous overhang. Takeda is stunned, realizing the implications. He knows that descending a vertical wall is already much harder than ascending since a climber can't use their legs for propulsion. On a slanted overhang, the burden on the arms becomes even greater, making a descent almost impossible. Excitedly, Takeda exclaims that this is a big scoop. His senior, however, watches with a grim expression. He states with cold certainty that once the climber's strength gives out, he will, without a doubt, fall. His prediction is already unfolding. High on the rock face, Mori feels the immense strain, realizing his body weight is putting far more pressure on his fingertips than he'd thought. A wave of panic washes over him as he understands he cannot move his other hand to the next hold. His body begins to tremble uncontrollably. His fingers, slick with sweat, start to slip from their precarious hold. He feels as if an invisible force is peeling him away from the rock itself. From below, Takeda screams in horror. He fell. Mori plummets through the air, a silent scream etched on his face as the mountain rushes past. His fall is abruptly halted. With impossible speed, he has jammed his hand deep into a fissure in the rock, arresting his momentum. Below, the two journalists watch in stunned silence, their disbelief palpable. He stares into the middle distance, his eyes wide with the shock of his own survival. The realization dawns on him. He has stopped. His arm is wedged so tightly into the crack that it seems to have become part of the mountain itself. The senior journalist, observing from afar, recognizes the move as a climbing technique, using the hand as a wedge to support the body. He notes that if Mori truly commits, he can rest. Mori himself feels a strange sensation, as if his arm is now completely connected to the rock. He presses his body against the vertical face. A profound sense of unity washes over him. It feels as though he and the rock have become one. The pain vanishes, replaced by a quiet confidence. He knows he can do it. From the ground, the senior journalist watches in awe. He points out that Mori is now following the crack, intending to climb all the way up the impossible overhang. Takeda, peering through his telephoto lens, suddenly loses sight of the climber. The senior journalist lowers his binoculars, a look of shock on his face as he realizes Mori has disappeared over the top. Meanwhile, far below on the rocky slope, Shirai sits injured and alone. She stares upward, her face a mask of fear and desperation. Her terror culminates in a desperate, piercing scream. She cries out Miyamoto's name, her voice echoing across the desolate landscape. In the midst of her cry, a hand suddenly grasps hers. She looks up, startled, to see Mori kneeling before her. He has somehow descended the treacherous terrain to reach her side. Her fear melts into stunned relief. Tears well in her eyes as she gazes at her rescuer, whispering his name in disbelief. Meanwhile, the two journalists who had witnessed the incredible feat debated their next move. The senior journalist noted that if the climber was indeed a high school student, he had the appearance of a complete rookie, a fact his younger colleague, Takeda, found hard to believe. With a sly, calculating expression, the senior journalist pondered how to frame the story. Should they build the boy up into a celebrated figure, or should they tear him down? A desperate scream echoes through the mountainside. Miyamoto is frantic, his face a mask of terror as he shouts that's his fault. He blames himself, crying out that he took his eyes off Yumi. His friend Ishida tries to calm him, insisting that they aren't sure of anything yet, but Miyamoto stammers, lost in his fear of what might have happened to her. His panic is interrupted by the sound of falling rocks from further down the slope. Miyamoto's head snaps towards the sound, his eyes wide with dread. He calls out Yumi's name, convinced that the sound must be connected to her. Down on the treacherous incline, Mori Bunu lies exhausted on the rocky ground. On his back is Yumi, equally spent. He has just carried her up the steep face, and both are covered in dirt and scrapes from the ordeal. From the path above, Miyamoto spots them. His expression of shock hardens instantly. Ignoring his friend's call to wait, he charges down the slope, landing heavily near the pair. He immediately confronts Mori, his face twisted in fury. Miyamoto roars, demanding to know what Mori was doing, accusing him of recklessly going off on his own as a complete beginner. From the ground, Yumi weakly protests that he has it all wrong. As Yumi tries to explain, Miyamoto's anger gives way to concern. He grabs her shoulders, asking if she is hurt. She denies any serious injury, admitting only that she might have sprained her ankle slightly. Mori watches them, his gaze sharp and intense. Yumi persists, trying to tell him that Mori was only helping her, but Miyamoto silences her with a shout. He turns his rage back on Mori, yelling that if he had fallen, both of them would have died. He continues his tirade, questioning the sanity of climbing a cliff while carrying someone on his back without a rope. Mori's expression remains placid as he explains simply, "I saw you falling and didn't think." Miyamoto just scoffs in response. At that moment, Ishida catches up to them, calling out to Onishi-sensei. He asks Miyamoto if it's true that he found Yumi. From the path above, Onishi-sensei and another student look down, stunned into silence. Below, Miyamoto tends to Yumi's ankle as Mori stand a short distance away. Ishida watches the scene unfold, thinking to himself that he can't believe it. At the top of the cliff, Yumi looks down the sheer drop, realizing the only feature below is an overhanging wall. She understands there is no path up from the bottom, meaning the only way to their position was to climb the face directly. She recalls seeing this spot on a previous hike, confirming her assessment. Her realization dawns on Miyamoto and his friends as well. Miyamoto mutters that he knew there was something unusual about that guy, Mori. His friend Ishida stammers, grasping the incredible implication of what Mori must have done. The full, intimidating view of the overhanging rock face confirms their thoughts. They now understand that Mori had decided, on the spot, to perform a free solo climb on a wall of this staggering height. Ishida exclaims that Mori wasn't normal. He had just pioneered an entirely new, untrodden route. Miyamoto's expression hardens, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and intense fury. He grinds his teeth, seething. From the woods below, his friends shout up, announcing they're lowering a rope and telling him to secure Yumi first. Miyamoto is already holding her, having brought her to safety. Down below, an exhausted Mori expertly threads the rope through a carabiner. Miyamoto assures Yumi she is fine now. As Mori looks up, his eyes wide with strain, Miyamoto looks down and demands the rope. He acknowledges that Mori overused his arms and pushed past his limits, then offers a grudging thank you for saving Yumi, stating he'll give his respects for now. Mori quietly agrees. Miyamoto declares he will bring Yumi up first and then return for him, telling him to wait. Despite his battered state, a faint, determined smile touches Mori's lips. He thinks to himself that he wants to continue climbing like this for a little while longer. Hearing this, Miyamoto smirks and tells him to do as he wishes, then begins to lead Yumi away. She turns back to thank Mori, promising to wait for him at the top. Mori watches them go, his gaze already fixed on the path ahead. As they walk, Yumi asks Miyamoto if it's okay to leave Mori behind in his exhausted state. Miyamoto dismisses her concern, saying it's fine. He explains with a knowing look that once a man has an ache, a deep-seated drive, he has to see it through to the very end. Yumi watches, her expression filled with worry. On the rock face, Mori's body trembles with exhaustion. His hands are raw, his limbs battered and unresponsive. Yet, a strange sensation courses through him. He feels an inexplicable power, a belief that he could climb anywhere. This feeling fuels his resolve. He grits his teeth, refusing to stop. The desire to keep climbing like this forever, to push endlessly higher and farther, consumes him as he continues his ascent. He pushes upward, but a sudden jolt makes him whip his head around. His eyes widen in disbelief as he sees Miyamoto descending rapidly, leaving him completely alone on the vast rock face. Now truly by himself, he takes in the breathtaking, formidable vista. An endless sea of peaks and forested valleys spreads out below him, emphasizing his isolation. His attention, however, is drawn from the panorama to a single, magnificent summit in the distance. A powerful presence seems to emanate from it, capturing his gaze completely. He feels a connection, a sense that the mountain itself has noticed him. Unbeknownst to him, he is being watched. From a nearby ridge, a young journalist named Takeda excitedly looks through binoculars, declaring it an amazing scoop. A moving story of a boy saving a girl's life. His more experienced senior scoffs, calling him an idiot. He understands the truth. Mori climbed that entire rock face by himself. Their scoop quickly makes its way back to the city. At a newsstand, the latest issue of Weekly Shuiai features the story. A photograph of Mori's perilous ascent is plastered on the page, detailing the reckless, ropeless climb and framing it as a wild stunt by the Yokosuka North High Climbing Club. A newspaper article detailing a reckless, unsanctioned climb at Yokosuka North High School lies open. A teacher with a goatee, Unishi, reads it with concern. Standing near the principal's office, he confirms to an unseen person that the report, however sensationalized, is true. Inside the office, Unishi passionately defends Mori Bunnaru to the principal, insisting the boy was only trying to help a fallen club member and was not the dangerous character depicted. He declares his intent to file a formal complaint with the publisher. Another teacher cautions him against speaking so carelessly, warning that escalating the issue could bring scrutiny upon the school itself. Unishi slams his fist on a surface, frustrated that he cannot deny the basic facts of the incident. His face is a mask of intensity as he continues his plea. He argues that it was through climbing that Mori had finally begun to open his heart to his surroundings. He desperately questions what will happen to the boy if they fail to protect him now. The principal, however, remains unmoved by the passionate defense. He states coolly that the school must impose some kind of punishment on the climbing club and asks if there are any objections. Unishi can only stare back, defeated. The consequence of a decision is swift and severe. The climbing club is suspended indefinitely, leaving the members in a state of shock. The club members react to the news with dismay. Ishida complains that as third years, their time is running out. Yumi tearfully apologizes, feeling that her selfish actions are to blame. Unishi also apologizes to everyone, taking responsibility and vowing to work to get the club's activities reinstated as quickly as possible. Miyamoto, however, reacts with pure rage. He lets out a furious roar, kicking a climbing mat and cursing the newspaper article. He scoffs at the suspension, declaring that if they can't use the wall, there are plenty of rocks to climb outside. His outburst over, Miyamoto dismissively announces he's hungry and walks off. Yumi calls after him and follows. Left behind, Ishida scratches his head, resigning himself to the situation and deciding to go back to the classroom to read manga. As the others disperse, Unishi approaches Mori and apologizes. Mori tells him not to worry, calling it an accident. Unishi agrees that Mori's actions weren't wrong, but Mori quietly contradicts him, stating that he is the one who is most at fault. Mori's gaze is downcast as he reflects on his own perceived nature. He thinks to himself that it has been a long time, but the pattern remains. Whenever he is involved, things always go wrong. In an office, a journalist sits with Unishi-sensei, revealing a shocking rumor to a listening Miyamoto, that Mori drove a classmate to suicide. Miyamoto reacts with disbelief. The journalist elaborates that when the classmate jumped from the roof, Mori was the only other person present. With a grim expression, Unishi-sensei confirms that this is true. The weight of his past isolates Mori, who stands alone, reinforcing his belief that he is better off by himself. Miyamoto, however, stares with wide, shocked eyes, the disturbing information about Mori taking root in his mind. As Mori turns to walk away, his face obscured by shadow, Miyamoto suddenly calls out to him. With desperate urgency, he yells for Mori to wait, to not go. His shout transforms into a silent, internal plea, visualized as a hand reaching out toward Mori's retreating silhouette. Miyamoto desperately wants him not to go alone, to stay by his side. Meanwhile, the journalist, Kurosawa, is driven by a colleague, observing the school from their vehicle. He muses on the business potential of a climbing star in Japan, comparing it to major sports in Europe. Kurosawa believes that if a single hero emerges, it could spark a boom worth 100 million yen to whoever manages them. Kurosawa explains his cynical philosophy to his colleague. He claims society doesn't want heroes, but monsters, which is why he wrote the article to build Mori up. People may judge reckless acts aloud, but secretly, they want to see someone do something outrageous. Just then, he spots Mori walking alone, remarking with satisfaction, "The monster's shown himself." Mori, lost in his own world, is startled when a voice calls out, "You there?" He turns to find the journalist, who introduces himself as Kurosawa Matsumi. With Miyamoto standing silently beside him, Kurosawa casually asks Mori for a moment of his time, suggesting his name might be recognizable from the article he wrote. The scene shifts to a nearby cafe. In a bizarre turn of events, Kurosawa bows his head onto the table before Mori, dramatically begging for forgiveness, while Miyamoto sits beside him, looking on. He sat in stunned silence as the journalist, Kurosawa, continued his bizarre apology. Kurosawa admitted his article might have been too flashy, but insisted that impact was necessary. He then changed his tone, praising Mori's climbing and stating he knew from their first meeting that Mori was no ordinary climber. The journalist continued his flattery, calling the previous day's climb amazing before pointedly asking if Mori preferred to climb by himself. Kurosawa's expression was one of intense, calculating interest. His tone shifted again as he revealed they had done some research, bringing up Mori's disqualification from a competition for throwing away a rope. Annoyed, Mori stood up, declaring he was going home, but Kurosawa urged him to wait and look at something. In response, Kurosawa slid a photograph across the table. It showed a formidable, snow-covered mountain peak. Mori froze, his eyes widening in shock and recognition as he stared at the image. Mori's breath caught. He held the photograph, a realization dawning on him. This was it. This was the mountain that had looked at him. From across the table, Miyamoto watched with a knowing smirk. His eyes remained wide with fascination as Kurosawa identified the peak, Yatsugate. More specifically, Mount Aka, the highest point in the range. The journalist added that at 2,899 meters, it was still covered in snow. He finally spoke, asking if Kurosawa meant ice climbing. The journalist clarified that he was talking about climbing snowy mountains, observing that Mori must be a beginner in that specific discipline. Kurosawa leaned back with a triumphant grin. He revealed he was planning a series of articles and had been hoping Mori would attempt increasingly difficult mountains. He declared himself glad, proclaiming that he would get to witness the birth of a genius climber. He pressed his advantage, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He mused that snowy mountains were a good subject and that he could write a great article titled, "Mori Buntaru has performed another amazing feat." Mori stared back, utterly captivated. But Mori was no longer listening to the journalist's pitch. He stood clutching the photograph, his mind consumed by a single thought. On a snowy peak, all the dirty and unpleasant things of the world below would be washed away in the pure whiteness. His eyes were wide with a dangerous, burgeoning obsession. He walks away, leaving the journalist Kurosawa and Miyamoto at their table. Miyamoto watches him go, asking Kurosawa if he thinks Mori is truly on board with the plan. Confident, Kurosawa states that since Mori took the photograph of the mountain, there is no doubt in his mind. As Kurosawa expresses his certainty, Miyamoto casually lights a cigarette. He exhales a plume of smoke and admits that he has never gone climbing, let alone on a snowy mountain, his tone casting a shadow of doubt or indifference over the entire scheme. At a residence, an answering machine activates. A pre-recorded message plays, asking the caller to leave a message after the beep. A moment later, a man's voice speaks, identifying himself as Kurosawa from Weekly Shuiai. Mori Buntaru listens to the message. Kurosawa's voice continues, stating that he sent the item they had discussed and asks Mori to confirm he received it. Kurosawa concludes by saying he looks forward to hearing from him, and Mori hangs up the phone. Meanwhile, in a vehicle parked on a city street at night, Harakinto voices his doubt, wondering if their plan will succeed after their attack on Mori in the magazine. The manager, seated beside him, concedes that Mori isn't going to believe them so easily. He holds a flip phone, a small smile on his face as he thinks about Mori not coming. Then, taking a drag from a cigarette, his expression shifts to one of absolute confidence as he declares that Mori will definitely come. He is certain of it. The scene shifts to a high school, just outside the guidance office. A man's voice is heard apologizing profusely to someone named Shirai, admitting that everything that happened was because he invited her to be in the club. Inside the office, the teacher, Onishi, sits across from Shirai. She sits with her head bowed, her hands clasped in her lap, listening silently as he speaks. Elsewhere in the school, Miyamoto and his friend Ishida walk down a hallway. Ishida brings up the fact that the climbing club is now suspended and asks Miyamoto what he wants to do after school. They then spot Yumi standing alone, looking downcast. Ishida seems to understand the gravity of the situation, but Miyamoto approaches her directly, asking if she is free and wants to go to karaoke. She turns, forcing a bright, cheerful smile. Yumi apologizes and declines the offer, claiming she has to go home and study. As she walks away, Ishida calls out her name in surprise. Watching her leave, Ishida turns to Miyamoto and asks if Yumi was just crying. Miyamoto just stares ahead, a look of pure confusion on his face. In the background, Onishi-san is seen exiting the guidance office. His friend, Ishida, stares at his phone in disbelief, exclaiming, "Huh? What the hell is this?" Miyamoto turns, asking what has him so agitated. Miyamoto snatches the flip phone as his friends decide to investigate further in the school's computer room. There, they discover an anonymous online forum filled with malicious posts. Commenters mock the climbing club, calling them idiots and suggesting they smoke, with one post wishing for them to fall and die to make bigger news. Inside the computer room, the teacher Onishi explains that since a recent magazine article, this underground school site has been overflowing with slander about the climbing club. As Ishida looks on in shock, Miyamoto's knuckles whiten on the desk, his expression hardening as he growls that they're being messed with. Onishi continues, noting it's a pity for Shirai, as these rumors could reach the principal and cost her a college recommendation. He adds that the anonymous posters are even targeting Yumi. The mention of her name pushes Miyamoto's fury to its peak. Ishida points to the screen, exclaiming that there's even a picture of Yumi taken during class. He reads the caption aloud, identifying her as the slut girl everyone is talking about. Miyamoto stares, his expression unreadable beneath the simmering rage. His face contorts into a mask of pure fury, his eyes wide and wild as the full weight of the malicious attacks on his friend settles upon him. Meanwhile, far from the conflict, Mori Buntaru stands in the quiet school library. He holds a photo book, its cover displaying the title Famous Mountain Ranges, Yatsugate. He stands alone between the tall shelves, completely absorbed in the book, a silent figure finding solace away from the school's social ecosystem. The pages reveal a stark, beautiful photograph of a snow-dusted, jagged mountain ridge, a world of silent, imposing rock and ice. Crouching by the shelf, Mori closes the book. He internally admits that it's no good. He can't bring himself to believe what those other climbers were saying. The mountains in the book offer no escape from his own swirling doubts. He walks alone down a silent school hallway, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting elsewhere. In a classroom, a desk lies overturned. Miyamoto, his face a mask of pure fury, screams into the room, demanding the person who wrote the slanderous posts show themselves. He roars that he will kill them. His rage finds a physical target. Miyamoto grabs Fukumoto by the collar, lifting him slightly as he demands to know if he heard who was responsible. The other student can only let out a terrified whimper. As Miyamoto continues his interrogation, his friend Ishida rushes forward, pleading for him to stop and calm down. From the doorway, Mori and Yumi watch the scene unfold. Miyamoto whirls on his friend, shouting that it is not all right. He yells that because of people posting about the accident, he is going to lose his college recommendation. He shoves his friend's hand away, his fury unabated as he screams at the terrified student to say something. The commotion finally draws the attention of the faculty. Onishi-sensei and another teacher, Onishi, rush towards the classroom as students scatter in fear. As his friends, including Ishida, struggle to hold him back, Miyamoto's wild eyes land on Mori, who has been watching silently. He demands that Mori say something, revealing that the slanderous posts also contained horrible things about him. The arrival of the faculty brings the confrontation to a head. Onishi-sensei points an accusatory finger, shouting that Miyamoto is indefinitely suspended. The other teacher, Onishi, recognizes Miyamoto and begins to escort him from the room. As he's being led away, Miyamoto twists back, his face a snarl of defiance. He declares that it's no problem, roaring that he is quitting this damn school entirely. The teacher, Onishi, attempts to de-escalate, telling Miyamoto they can discuss things calmly in the staff room as he leads him down the hall. Ishida watches them go, calling out Miyamoto's name in disbelief and concern. With Miyamoto gone, Ishida turns his frustration on the silent observer. He approaches Mori, sighing with exasperation. He directly accuses him, stating that ever since Mori arrived, things have gotten all messed up. His friend's words strike Mori with the force of a physical blow. His face is cast in heavy shadow, his eyes wide with shock as the final, damning accusation echoes in his mind. If it weren't for him, none of this would have happened. He stood motionless in the hallway, the accusation hanging in the air. As the city outside carried on under a cloudy sky, Miyamoto fled down the corridor, his silhouette disappearing from sight. One of his friends called out his name in vain, but he was already gone, leaving Mori to face the silent judgment of his classmates. Later that night, Miyamoto's climbing gear, helmet, shoes, and all, sat packed away in a box, a testament to his declared departure from sport. Elsewhere, under the cover of darkness, a solitary apartment building stood silent. But Mori was not idle. A profound shift had occurred within him. His gaze, once merely annoyed or brooding, now held a sharp, unwavering focus, a silent declaration of his own. In a quiet, empty playground, a hand grips the cold metal bar of a swing set, knuckles turning white from the immense strain. The one exercising is Miyamoto. His friend, Ishida, rushes towards him, shouting that this is no time for pull-ups. He desperately pleads with Miyamoto to go and apologize to Onishi-sensei, believing they might still be able to fix things if they hurry. He turns his head, his expression cold and unyielding. Miyamoto ignores the plea, stating with finality that he has already decided to go to France. Nearby, Mori lies on the ground, evidently just knocked down, as Miyamoto callously remarks that it was fun. With a booming laugh, Miyamoto walks away. He declares that climbers don't need academic qualifications and mockingly wonders if the vice principal is feeling better now that he's gone. Ishida is left speechless, asking what kind of stupid crap he's spouting. From his position on the ground, Mori looks up, his face a mask of pure shock as he watches Miyamoto's retreating form. He can only manage a stunned utterance in response to the sudden turn of events. Ishida angrily confronts Miyamoto, demanding to know what he meant. Miyamoto smirks, claiming he hit the nail on the head, then violently shoves his friend aside, yelling that it has nothing to do with him. The scene shifts, showing a lone cyclist passing a gas station against the backdrop of the city. Meanwhile, at a train station, Yumi tells someone over the phone that she's fine and heading to a cram school. As the train pulls in, she says her goodbyes. But once alone, her facade crumbles. Tears stream down her face as she clutches her hand, wondering why things had to end up this way. Later, in a dimly lit bar, a man with a goatee and a plaid shirt enters. He spots another man at the counter and addresses him as Kurosawa-senpai, remarking that it has been years since they last met. Kurosawa turns, a knowing smirk on his face. He asks for the man's order and offers to pay, correctly guessing his presence is related to the hiking club's graduation mountain climb. Kurosawa then expresses his surprise, stating he never thought the man would become a teacher. He continued his verbal assault on the teacher, Onishi, clarifying that his words were not defamation, but an indictment. He stated that the danger brought about by poor supervision in club activities was entirely Onishi's responsibility. Onishi pleaded with him to stop agitating the situation. The journalist, Kurosawa, merely smirked, remarking that the teacher was as hard-assed as ever. He added that while they are hurt now, they have no chance of winning. He goaded Onishi further, telling him to dispute it if he wished, but that it would be a futile effort. With a condescending look, Kurosawa declared that he would be honest. Onishi was a good person, but ultimately, just a simple, wholesome idiot. The teacher could only grunt in frustration. The teacher's frustration erupted into anger as a realization struck him. He shouted, asking if Kurosawa had contacted Mori. Kurosawa calmly replied that Mori was out of his control. Enraged, Onishi grabbed the journalist, demanding to know what a failure like him knew about the boy and warning him to stay away from his student, alluding to a past transgression on a mountain. The two men stared each other down. Onishi's face was contorted with protective fury, while Kurosawa met his gaze with a cold, unwavering smirk. As the tension simmered, a phone call connected two others. Takeda reported to Kurosawa that he had secured the reservation at the mountain lodge, confirming their departure for the following evening. Kurosawa ended the call, turning back to the teacher. "You're too late, sensei," he said with finality, snapping his phone shut. It was, he thought, too bad. Elsewhere, in the quiet of a dark room, a lone figure sat hunched on the edge of a bed. The building stood silent against the night sky. The figure was Mori, his eyes wide with shock. His solitude was shattered by Yumi's anguished scream, blaming him entirely. "If it weren't for you," she cried, "none of this would have happened." As her accusation hung in the air, Mori remained silent in the corner, his climbing gear packed and waiting beside him. He sits hunched over, his eyes wide with a frantic urgency. A single thought consumes him. He has to go, and he has to hurry. This compulsion drives him away from the city, deep into the snow-covered mountains under a dark, overcast sky. His journey leads him to the Amida Mountain Lodge, a solitary A-frame structure nestled in the quiet, snow-blanketed wilderness. Inside, the lodgekeeper is alerted by the sound of the sliding door. He pulls it open to see who has arrived. Standing before him is Mori, clad in a heavy winter jacket and carrying a large backpack, prepared for the harsh alpine environment. The keeper notes his early arrival. Mori, looking downcast, introduces himself and states his intention to lodge there for the night. The man seems to recognize the name, his eyes widening in surprise as he asks if Mori plans to climb from here. He explains his travel itinerary. He took a train to Chino Station the previous night and caught the first bus this morning to get here. The keeper nods in understanding, remarking that Mori has arrived at just the right time. He gestures outside, pointing out that the clouds are beginning to part, revealing the first glow of the morning sun on the peaks. At the mention of the mountains, Mori's head snaps up, his eyes fixed on the vista with a renewed, almost desperate intensity. He stands alone at the edge of the tree line, gazing at the vast, sun-kissed mountain range before him. He feels a sense of certainty that the weather will be good. A perfect day for what he has come to do. The sun crests over the jagged, snow-covered peaks of a vast mountain range. Below, a dark forest canopy is blanketed in white, with a celestial, constellation-like pattern arcing through the sky above the highest summit. An older man with a weathered face, white goatee, and dark beanie looks on with a gentle expression. Opposite him, the young man, Mori Bunu, stares back, his dark eyes wide with a look of intense focus or surprise. The old man speaks, his tone peaceful. He muses that if he were to die at the foot of this mountain, he wouldn't mind at all. Mori continues to listen, his expression unchanging and serious. He explains that this is his favorite place to view the Yatsugatake Mountains, which is why he chose to live here. He gestures toward his lodge, telling Mori he must be tired and should come in to rest. The man adds that due to an unseasonal heavy snow the day before, Mori is lucky to witness such scenery at this time of year. Rather than accept the invitation immediately, Mori's breath turns to mist in the cold air as he asks the smiling lodge keeper if he could walk around outside for a little while longer. As Mori turns and walks away, the keeper warns him to be careful with his footing in the snow. Mori offers his thanks, a pair of climbing shoes hanging from his backpack. He ventures onto a path that cuts through a silent, snow-laden forest of tall, dark trees. Mori walks through the quiet landscape, his breath pluming before him. He notes the profound stillness, where the only sound is the crunch of his own feet stepping in the deep snow. His steady pace is broken as his right leg suddenly plunges through the snow's surface, sinking deep. He lets out a strained grunt as he's caught off guard. The sudden loss of support sends him tumbling backward, falling completely into the thick, soft blanket of snow. He landed with a soft thud in the deep powder, the impact muffled by the thick blanket of white. Around him, the snow-laden forest stood in profound silence. Lying on his back, staring up at the gray sky, a realization settled in. No one was here. No one was coming. No one even knew he was in this exact spot. The thought, instead of bringing fear, sparked a flicker of something else in his eyes, a quiet thrill. He pushed himself up, his gaze panning across the pristine, untouched landscape. He let out a breath, the vapor clouding in the frigid air. With a determined crunch of his boot in the snow, he began to walk, his eyes wide with a sense of discovery. His path led him to a clearing, and as he looked up, the sight took his breath away. A formidable, snow-dusted mountain face loomed before him. "Awesome," he whispered to himself, completely captivated. He stood there for a moment, shivering slightly not from cold but from awe. His attention then caught a small, snow-covered sign marking a path. It read Mount Amida. He realized this trail was connected to the very mountain that held him mesmerized. A thought formed, a tempting proposition. He could follow it just for a little while. Meanwhile, not far away, a group of men sat in a vehicle. The driver questioned if Kurosawa was overdoing it with his tripod and long-distance lenses. His colleague worried if they could get any pictures the editor would like, suggesting they were just making a high school student act rashly. Another man mused that even an avalanche might make the boy happy, while the driver noted the rare, heavy snowfall from the day before. Kurosawa then explained the danger of the current conditions. In this season, the snow on the surface melts and crumbles easily, especially on the route from Hiragawara Valley to Mount Amida South Ridge. His colleague looked at him with dawning horror, realizing Kurosawa's true intent. As his colleague pointed out the window, exclaiming that he could see Mount Amida, Kurosawa confirmed it. He then revealed his chilling ambition. Capturing a photo of a person the moment before they were swallowed by an avalanche would be a big scoop. The journalist's gaze remains fixed on a peculiar cloud formation capping the distant mountain. His colleague, noticing his distraction, asks what's wrong, but Kurosawa dismisses it as nothing. Internally, however, a memory from 10 years prior surfaces. He tells himself there's no way a blizzard could occur in this season. At that same moment, Mori Buntaru flinches as something cold and wet strikes his cheek. He looks around, puzzled. The sky above is clear, yet he wonders if it's sleet or perhaps just snow blown from the trees by a gust of wind. Undeterred, he continues his trek into a snow-filled ravine. High above, the strange, lens-shaped cloud churns silently over the peak, growing more defined. Elsewhere, a mountain lodge, the old keeper shovels a path in the snow. Nearby, a small white stoat darts across the fresh powder. The sudden movement seems to draw attention from above, where an owl sits perched on a barren branch, alert and watchful. The lodge keeper stops his work, startled by the sight. He recalls an old piece of mountain wisdom. Owls active in the daytime are a bad omen, their vigorous hunting a sign that bad weather is imminent. His gaze follows the omen, lifting towards a mountain peak. He sees the same ominous cloud that has captured the journalist's attention. A wave of dread washes over him. He realizes this is an atmospheric depression, a storm, forming with a speed he has never witnessed in all his years on the mountain. Back at the roadside, the journalists are caught off guard as sleet begins to fall. The colleague shouts in disbelief, but Kurosawa is silent, his attention fixed on the slope where Mori, now in full climbing gear, marches steadily upward into the heart of the brewing tempest. The lodge keeper's voice is thick with panic as he addresses the two journalists. He gestures frantically, explaining that the boy they saw, their companion, left in the morning and has not yet come back. Both Kurosawa and his colleague are visibly startled by the old man's urgent warning. Kurosawa's expression hardens with concern as the lodge keeper continues, his voice rising to a shout. He is certain the boy was wearing jeans. He cries out that if they get wet in this rain, he will be frozen solid in no time. The old man's fears are already a reality high on the mountain. The climber's legs, encased in soaked denim, tremble violently. His teeth chatter uncontrollably, his face contorted into a pained grimace as the cold seeps deep into his bones. He throws his arms around his torso, a desperate and failing attempt to preserve warmth against the onslaught of the blizzard. The wind howls and the snow swirls, swallowing him in a vortex of white as the storm relentlessly batters him. The 23rd climb begins amidst a sudden onslaught of sleet. On a snow-covered mountain trail, Mori Buntaru presses forward, his arms crossed tightly against his chest as the wind howls. He grits his teeth, enduring the biting cold as ice and snow whip through the trees. The change in weather was shockingly abrupt. Mori can hardly believe it, realizing that while he'd heard mountain weather could deteriorate quickly, the reality is far more intense. The sleet stings his face as he stares into the storm, his expression a mixture of shock and grim determination. He knows there is no way he can continue his ascent. His only option is to hurry back down. With a renewed sense of urgency, he pushes on through the increasingly dense forest, the path ahead obscured by the driving snow. A sudden, alarming stiffness in his legs makes him look down. To his horror, he discovers that ice is forming directly on his jeans, the fabric freezing solid and sticking to his skin. A wave of panic washes over him. Realizing the extreme danger, Mori forces himself onward, desperate to get back down the mountain. Meanwhile, back at the lodge, the keeper steps outside and stops in shock. Mori's rucksack is sitting abandoned by the door. What's wrong with him? The keeper wonders aloud, realizing Mori left his gear behind. Inside, the lodge keeper apologizes to the journalist Kurosawa, admitting it was his fault for not anticipating how quickly the weather would turn. Kurosawa notes grimly that Mori went up completely unarmed, having left his insulating clothing behind. At that moment, Harakino announces he is going out to check, instructing them to call the Nagano police if he doesn't return within an hour. As he leaves, Hara turns back to Kurosawa, his expression fraught with worry. He insists that the situation is bad. If something happens to Mori, it won't just be their plan that fails, but their entire careers could be ruined. Kurosawa listens silently, acknowledging the gravity of police involvement. Kurosawa calmly flips open his phone, his gaze unwavering and cold. He states that you can't solve a big problem without some sacrifice. Hara stares at him, his face a mask of disbelief as he stammers Kurosawa's name, utterly appalled by the man's callousness. Far from the lodge, Mori continues his desperate struggle through the deep, unforgiving snow. Each step is a monumental effort as he sinks into the heavy drifts, fighting for every inch of progress. He stumbles, realizing with dread that the snow's consistency has changed. It's absorbing the sleet, becoming stickier and heavier, clinging to him. The feel is completely different than before. He tries to pull his leg free, but it won't move. A wave of despair hits him as he realizes, I can't lift my legs. He gasps for air, his body collapsing under the weight of the freezing sleet. Ice crackles as it forms on his gear, each breath a painful effort against the biting cold. His eyes, wild with exhaustion, scan the blizzard. A single thought dominates his mind. He needs to find a place sheltered from the wind, a place where he can finally rest. Meanwhile, Hara Kinto frantically follows the trail, only to see the footprints disappearing under the fresh snowfall. He knows he must hurry. Elsewhere, the lodge keeper, having discovered the tracks, looks on in horror. He realizes the boy has taken the South Ridge route of Mount Amida, a path not meant for average climbers. The old man watches as the sleet piles onto the new spring snow, making it dangerously heavy. The snowpack groans and cracks under his own weight, a grim testament to the mountain's instability. He understands this is an emergency he cannot handle alone. He must hurry back and call for help. In his mind, he pleads with Mori, urging him to keep walking no matter the pain, for to rest now would mean certain death. As if in answer to some prayer, Mori finds a small rock overhang. He stumbles towards it, a wave of profound relief washing over him as he finally escapes the direct assault of the wind. Thank God, he thinks. He collapses into the small space, huddling against the frozen rock, seeking any small measure of shelter from the raging blizzard. Back at the lodge, the keeper paces anxiously. The storm has become a complete snowstorm. He complains aloud that they are late, wondering when help will finally arrive. Kurosawa, however, remains perfectly calm, telling the man to relax and that they'll be here soon. At that exact moment, the crunch of tires on snow breaks the tension. The lodge keeper looks out in surprise, but Kurosawa simply smirks, remarking that their arrival was sooner than he thought. A vehicle pulls up to the lodge. The door opens and Onishi-sensei steps out, his expression grim. The lodge keeper rushes to the entrance, shouting his name, recognizing that help has finally arrived. He wasted no time, lunging forward and grabbing the journalist, Kurosawa, by his jacket. Kurosawa, unfazed, offered a smug apology for pulling the teacher from his busy schedule, stating he simply needed his help. The sudden aggression startled the lodge keeper and Kurosawa's colleague. Kurosawa calmly asked if he shouldn't be thanked, pointing out that he had called Onishi before anyone else. The question only fueled the teacher's rage, who roared at the journalist, demanding to know why he had gone near his student. He continued his explanation, his tone maddeningly reasonable. He reminded Onishi that Mori had chosen to go onto the mountain himself. Furthermore, he argued, involving the police would create troublesome, unjust suspicion, and a formal mountain rescue would be prohibitively expensive. The lodge keeper, his face etched with panic, interjected. He stressed that there was no time to waste, explaining that the boy was traveling light and would succumb to hypothermia and freeze to death within hours if he stopped to rest. The dire warning snapped Onishi out of his confrontation. He roared for help to be called at once, vowing to take full responsibility, a promise the lodge keeper quickly acknowledged. Meanwhile, high on the mountain slopes, the blizzard continued to rage, burying the landscape in a thick, swirling blanket of white. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a brilliant light pierced the gloom. The sun began to break through the clouds, its rays glinting off the fresh snow. The change did not go unnoticed. Hara Kinto, huddled against the cold, felt the shift. A profound sense of relief washed over him as he realized it was no longer cold. The warmth meant he was saved. He looked out across the vast, snow-covered expanse, a small figure in the immense wilderness. The storm had finally stopped. A lone figure trudges through the deep, heavy snow of the mountainside, the force of his steps sending sprays of white into the air. As he presses on through the biting cold and falling snow, Mori Buntaru feels a sudden, strange sensation. It's warm. The warmth is the herald of disaster. A massive wave of snow, an avalanche, erupts from above and crashes down upon him, engulfing him completely. Meanwhile, inside a mountain lodge, Ijima, dressed in full climbing gear, announces he is heading for the South Ridge route immediately. The lodge keeper pleads with him to wait for the rescue team, but Ijima insists there is no time to waste. The keeper warns him that it has been a storm for over an hour, and with the sleet sticking to the ridge, the danger of a second avalanche is high, making a solo attempt incredibly dangerous. Watching the tense exchange, The teacher Onishi worries about Ijima, but acknowledges the long wait for rescue. Through his goggles, Ijima's eyes burn with unwavering resolve, while the journalist Kurosawa observes from the side with a detached, almost bored expression. Kurosawa leans back in his seat, a smug and unbothered look on his face as the crisis unfolds around him. He is startled from his complacency when Ijima confronts him directly, asking him to come along. Kurosawa attempts to brush him off, claiming he is just a humble journalist and couldn't possibly help. Ijima's expression hardens as he tells him, "This is your mess." Ijima presses his point, his voice filled with cold fury. He reminds Kurosawa that he owes him for an incident on a mountain 10 years ago. Kurosawa's face contorts with shock and anger. Before the confrontation can escalate further, Onishi grabs Kurosawa's arm, telling him to stop. Shaking, Kurosawa reluctantly concedes. Ijima declares that while Kurosawa is the most trustworthy person he knows, there is no one else with experience available, leaving him no choice. With the matter settled, he gives the order. "Now let's go." The group prepares to venture out from the relative safety of the lodge. Outside, the party struggles through the blizzard. Onishi, already panting from exertion, is urged on by Ijima, who reminds him that every moment counts. They push forward into the blinding white expanse. He braced himself against the howling wind, snow stinging his face as he struggled to breathe. Beside him, Ijima pressed onward, his voice cutting through the gale. Ijima turned to him, his expression grim beneath his goggles, and made a pointed observation. Onishi had truly left the mountains behind. He then laid out their grim reality. They were now on the South Ridge route, where conditions would only worsen. Ijima reasoned that Mori, having lost the path, wouldn't head down into the valley where he'd be hopelessly lost. Instead, they had to do the opposite and aim for the top, hoping Mori was attempting to descend the mountain ridge. Kurosawa interjected, voicing the fear on everyone's mind. What if he was caught in an avalanche? Ijima's response was chillingly practical. He explained that Mori likely didn't know the technique for creating an air pocket by cupping a hand over his mouth. Without it, he would inhale the carbon dioxide gathering around him and perish within 4 minutes. There was no time. His eyes narrowed with grim resolve. Behind him, Kurosawa's face was a mask of disbelief at the cold calculation. "No choice, then," Ijima stated, hefting his ice axe. He led them to the base of a sheer, snow-covered rock face. "It's a shortcut," he announced, looking up the treacherous incline. "Shall we climb right up?" As he uncoiled a length of climbing rope, a faint, almost mocking smile touched Ijima's lips. He looked at Onishi and remarked that it had been a while since he'd had to tie a climbing rope for him. He sensed the teacher's hesitation and confronted him directly, asking if something was wrong, if Onishi couldn't trust him. Onishi swallowed hard, his eyes wide with apprehension, but he acquiesced. "Understand. Let's hurry." Meanwhile, buried deep beneath the snow, a faint consciousness stirred. Mori felt light, airy, with no strength entering his body. The question formed in the void, "Am I dead?" The thought followed that it didn't really matter. He had spent every day not knowing if he was truly living or dead anyway. But then, a new sensation, a faint pulse in his hand, a spreading warmth. It's hot." The feeling was familiar, a memory resurfacing, the sensation of his hand against the sun-warmed surface, reaching, climbing. He knew this feeling. He felt it, a jolt, a spark. His eyes shot open in the suffocating darkness. With a final, desperate surge, his hand erupted through the surface of the snow. The breakthrough gave him the opening he needed. He clawed his way out, head and shoulders emerging from his snowy tomb into the cold night air. Gasping raggedly, he gulped down the freezing air, his mind reeling. The sensation he'd felt buried deep beneath the snow, he was sure of it now. It was the undeniable, overwhelming feeling of being alive. And in that moment of raw survival, his gaze lifted to the dark silhouette of the mountain against the stars. A single driving purpose filled his mind: climb. On a desolate, snow-covered mountain, Mori Buntaru collapses, plunging his hands into the powder and gasping for breath. Exhaustion is etched on his face as he pants, his body having reached its limit. He looks up to find the snowstorm has ceased. Above him, a vast, clear sky filled with stars stretches out, a silent witness to his struggle against the backdrop of the town lights far below. The quiet is broken by the sound of teeth chattering violently. It is Ijima, his climbing partner, whose face is contorted by the biting cold. Mori stares, his own eyes wide with alarm at the sight. A sudden, intense chill seizes Mori's body. He realizes with a jolt the profound coldness settling in. He knows he must force himself to move, to fight off the encroaching freeze. His resolve hardens into a single, desperate thought that burns through the cold. He has to climb. Ahead of him, Ijima is already in motion, striking his ice axe into the frozen wall with a sharp clang, continuing their perilous ascent. Ijima glances back and shouts at Mori to stop dawdling. He explains their new, urgent threat. The radiative cooling has begun. With no clouds, the ground surface will lose all its heat. If the wind stops, all the cold air will sink to their level, creating a fatal drop in temperature. He notes that the storm has indeed stopped, a dangerous calm. Ijima then remarks that this exact phenomenon, radiative cooling after a snowstorm, is the same kind of weather that a man named Hodaka faced 10 years ago. A cruel smile spreads across Ijima's face. He taunts Mori, asking if he's still holding a grudge about what happened before. He then poses a chilling question, wondering aloud if Mori thinks he might cut his rope or even kill him right there on the mountain. The narrative shifts, focusing on the snow-capped peak of Hodaka as a caption appears, marking a jump in time. 10 years earlier, Hodaka. 10 years in the past, on a snow-covered mountain, panic erupts near a camp of buried tents. A frantic voice cuts through the wind, shouting in desperation for a female companion who has strayed from the group. The shouts belong to a young climber named Onishi. He argues with his teammates, insisting that they must act now, as the missing woman has been gone for over 10 hours. While another climber urges patience for the captain's decision, Onishi declares his intent to search for her trail alone, fearing that every second wasted puts her life in greater danger. Just then, a figure in full winter gear, his face hidden by a balaclava, emerges through the driving snow. The others call out to him. It is the club captain, Kurosawa. Onishi immediately pleads with him, asking to be allowed to go on the rescue and insisting he has the strength for it. Another climber adds that the wind has finally died down, giving them a narrow window of opportunity. Kurosawa's response is chilling and absolute. They are all to withdraw. Onishi stares, aghast, unable to process the order. He asks if the captain is truly suggesting they abandon her and descend the mountain alone. Before he can argue further, the club president intervenes, backing the captain's decision and forbidding Onishi from defying the order. Onishi turns to the president, begging him to reconsider, pleading that the missing climber, Reiko Kurosawa, is out there shivering and waiting for them. The president grabs Onishi, his face inches away. He coldly states that on the mountain, there is no room for cheap compassion. If Onishi wants to save anyone, he must first worry only about saving himself. The harsh words leave Onishi stunned. Following their captain's orders, the group begins the long, arduous descent. Kurosawa leads the way, shouting at them not to fall behind as they trudge through the deep snow before the storm returns. During the descent, Onishi calls out to Captain Kurosawa, who is roped ahead. He says he has something to tell him, questioning if Kurosawa can ever forgive him for his judgment. Kurosawa looks back, his breath fogging in the cold, and gives a chilling command, "Hurry up and cut that rope." Onishi grips the taut rope, the command echoing in his mind. He realizes with dawning horror that if he were to cut it, he would become the same kind of person as his captain, someone willing to sacrifice another to survive. The memory of the past fades, replaced by the biting cold of the present. A voice echoes in Mori's mind, calling his name, urging him to climb. His fingers strain against the rock as a single, desperate thought forms, a promise that he will never abandon his friend. Fueled by this vow, he continues to haul himself up the treacherous, snow-dusted cliff face. Amidst the pain and exhaustion, one powerful realization cuts through the haze. He is alive, right now, in this moment. He scrambles over the precipice, collapsing into a snowy thicket. A strange sensation washes over him, a feeling of warmth that seems out of place in the frigid air. His face, beaded with sweat, shows a dazed relief. Before him lies a mountain path. A flicker of hope ignites within him. He believes that if he can just follow this trail down, he will be all right. With grim determination, he begins his descent. The path leads him to an overlook. He stops, his silhouette stark against the snow as he gazes out at the vista below, a vast, sprawling blanket of lights under a starry sky. As he stares, the truth of his sight dawns on him. His eyes widen, a small cut visible on his lower lip. It is a town, civilization, safety. The vision of the distant lights is overwhelming. His eye is wide, reflecting the countless pinpricks of light, before he squeezes it shut against a wave of profound exhaustion. With renewed purpose, he turns and trudges down the snowy path through the dark woods. But a glance at his feet reveals a horrifying detail. He is wearing simple indoor school shoes, now completely soaked and utterly inadequate for the mountain's harsh conditions. On a frigid mountain night, a flashback begins, chronicling the grudges between two people. Captain Kurosawa, his face partially obscured by a balaclava, chastises his partner, Onishi, telling him to think about his partner for once, lest they end up with two disasters. Below, Onishi checks his gauge, noting with alarm that the temperature has plummeted to -10 degrees due to radiative cooling, making the situation extremely dangerous. As Kurosawa turns and walks away into the darkness, Onishi's eyes widen in panic. Realizing the gravity of their circumstances, he shouts for his captain to wait. He pays Onishi no mind, striding purposefully toward a vast, chaotic expanse of snow and ice, the unmistakable remains of a recent, massive avalanche. Surveying the destruction, Kurosawa dryly notes its immense size. Onishi, however, announces his intention to search through the debris, asking Kurosawa to stand watch for another slide. Kurosawa turns to him, incredulous, questioning if he is truly serious about searching the entire area alone. Kurosawa dismisses the idea as futile. He explains that while Mori might be under the snow, Anyone completely buried has only about 30 minutes before they're gone. With the odds near zero, he tells Onishi to give up, harshly accusing him of always being the type to abandon his comrades. His own words trigger a memory. Kurosawa's mind flashes back 10 years to a different, desperate moment. Bloodied and battered, he had vowed to save someone named Reiko-san, pleading for her to wait for him. Returning to the present of the flashback, Kurosawa's resolve hardens. He grabs Onishi firmly by the shoulder, shouting for him to come back and declaring that he won't allow him to act alone. Onishi wrenches away, his face contorted with frantic determination. He screams that he won't turn back, even if it costs him his life, not until he finds her. His shouting subsides into a desperate plea. He turns back to Kurosawa, begging for just 1 hour to search. Suddenly, Onishi's expression shifts to one of utter shock. He stares past his captain at the towering, icy cliff face, stammering Kurosawa's name in disbelief. He follows Kurosawa, who leads them down a treacherous slope, away from the main group. The other climbers watch, confused, as Kurosawa pushes forward without hesitation. Finally, they arrive at a spot in the snow, and Kurosawa announces that this is the place. There, nestled against a rocky outcrop, is a figure covered by a white sheet, a climbing pack resting beside them in the deep snow. Kurosawa's eye widens slightly as he looks upon the serene, pale face of the woman lying in the snow, Reiko. He explains to a stunned Onishi that he had found Reiko after she went missing during a fall. He grimly details that her entire body below the waist was crushed. Onishi can only stare, stammering her name in horror. The sight confirms his words. Her lower half is mangled beyond recognition. Kurosawa elaborates on the terrible bleeding and immense spinal damage, concluding that while she is somehow still breathing, her survival is impossible. Onishi whirls on him, his voice cracking with desperation. He questions why Kurosawa kept this a secret and demands they call for help right away, wondering if this means they will all die here too. He finally responds, his tone chillingly pragmatic. He states there is no need to make meaningless sacrifices for a person who is already as good as dead. In response, Onishi defiantly declares that he will carry her back himself. He grabs a nearby climbing rope, his sudden resolve startling Kurosawa. But as he examines the rope, a horrifying realization dawns. The end has been cleanly severed. His gaze snaps towards Kurosawa, disbelief turning to suspicion as he questions if the rope was cut. The suspicion explodes into a direct, horrified accusation. His eyes wide with terror, he demands to know if Kurosawa cut Reiko's climbing rope after she fell, all to save his own life. His eyes widened in horror at the sound of the rope snapping. Across from him, Kurosawa offered a cold, dismissive smirk. That girl's heavy, he remarked with chilling indifference. The callousness shattered his shock, replacing it with pure rage. He screamed at Kurosawa, his voice raw with fury, calling him a failure and an abomination. His cries for Reiko echoed unanswered as she fell, ultimately breathing her last in the quiet snows of Hitaka. It was in that moment of loss that a young Onishi made a resolution to never become a man like Kurosawa. Back in the present, that same fire burns in his eyes as he vows to never give up, not as long as there is even a small chance. As he stood firm in his conviction, Hara Kinto watched him with a condescending smile. Just like always, Hara commented, you haven't changed a bit. You're immature. His taunt was cut short as his eyes caught something in the distance. He pointed urgently across the snowfield, shouting, H.A. Onishi! Look over there! Following his direction, Onishi saw them. Footprints. A clear trail leading up the ridge from the site of the avalanche. The impossible truth struck him. He's alive. The realization dawned on both men. Hara stared, utterly dumbfounded, muttering that it couldn't be real. Onishi's face was a mask of shock as he stammered the name, Mori. And there, against all odds, was Mori Buntaru. Having clawed his way out from under the snow, he was already trudging steadily up the mountain, his expression grim and unyielding. On the dark mountain, Onishi stares out at the distant city lights in disbelief. He remarks that the town seems so close, yet feels impossibly far. Beside him, Kurosawa remains silent, his face a grim mask. A lone thought hangs over the desolate, snow-covered path leading through the trees. On this mountain, something irreversible has occurred. Kurosawa's attention shifts to Mori Buntaru, who stands nearby. He questions Mori's presence, pointing out that the path downwards leads to safety. He grits his teeth and urges them to hurry onward. For a moment, Kurosawa's gaze drifts back to the town lights, his expression strangely relaxed, as if detached from the peril surrounding them. The scene shifts to the present day. Outside the funeral hall for Shindu Reiko, a crowd of reporters waits. One of them spots Kurosawa Matsumi arriving alone, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He is immediately swarmed. Reporters shout questions, asking if he told the police the truth and how he feels about the climber who perished after he cut the rope. In the crowd, Onishi calls out his name. Other onlookers murmur that cutting a rope is almost unheard of in climbing. Annoyed, Kurosawa tells them all to go home. Suddenly, an older woman bursts forward, her face a mask of anguish. You murderer, she screams, demanding he give her Reiko back. A man tries to hold her, pleading for his wife to stop, insisting that Reiko chose the mountains herself. Kurosawa silently extinguishes his cigarette. Amidst the flashing cameras and the woman's continued screams of grief, Kurosawa bows his head and body in a deep, formal apology. After the commotion, Onishi confronts him. He states that he still hasn't heard the full story directly from Kurosawa and demands to know why he did such a thing. Kurosawa stands silently, his back to Onishi, looking out at the city. His intense gaze remained fixed on Kurosawa, who finally relented. Agreeing to speak, Kurosawa stated it was the same story he had told the police. He began his account of the events on the mountain, explaining that after about 10 hours of separation from the main party, he found Reiko. They roped together and began traversing the east and Nosawa Ridge, noting that her gait was steady. The flashback shows Reiko apologizing for causing trouble and urging them to hurry. Breathing heavily, Kurosawa told her not to push herself too hard. More than anything, he warned her to be careful, as the area they were in was treacherous. Despite his warning, Reiko took a hesitant step forward. A sudden realization struck her. Kurosawa saw it too. She had stepped onto a fragile overhang of snow, a hidden trap on the mountainside. The ground shattered beneath her. Kurosawa yelled for her to stop, but it was too late. The entire snow cornice collapsed, sending Reiko plummeting into the void below. The sudden, violent tension on the rope ripped Kurosawa from his footing. His ice axe was torn from the snow as he was dragged helplessly toward the precipice. He clawed desperately at the ice, groaning with the strain. Far below, Reiko dangled at the end of the line, her life hanging by the thread he struggled to hold. Somehow, he arrested the fall, his body becoming the sole anchor against the abyss. Back in the present, Kurosawa's voice explains that he endured that situation for over 10 minutes. He adds that, rather than being something to be blamed for, it should be praised. His tone turns cold and clinical as he cites the 37th article of the Penal Code, the item concerning emergency escape. He lectures Onishi that in order to ensure one's own safety on a mountain, one can cut their own climbing rope and not be charged with a crime, then pointedly asks if Onishi didn't know that. Onishi is stunned in his silence, stammering as he processes the horrific implication. Kurosawa knew the law and cut the rope anyway. Turning away to light a cigarette, Kurosawa admits that if he hadn't known, he might have wavered. The cold logic shatters Onishi's composure. His face twists in fury as he screams that Kurosawa couldn't be a worse rope partner. He roars that if he were Reiko's partner, he would never have let go of the rope, even if it cost him his life. Kurosawa's eyes widen, utterly shocked by the raw condemnation. He lunges forward, his face contorted with rage as he grabs Kurosawa by the collar. He roars that above any laws or mountain morals, he will never grant his forgiveness. The outburst is so violent that Onishi-sensei must physically restrain him, pulling him back. As Kurosawa stumbles to the ground, the man continues to scream, telling him not to speak such naive things. He bellows that a mountain isn't a place to entrust one's life to others, but a place where one must be prepared to die if they become a burden. Sometime later, Kurosawa stands outside with Mori Bunnaru. He takes a call, his expression grim as he confirms the details. Hanging up, a small, bitter smile forms on his face as he remarks to Mori that it seems his job offer has been withdrawn. He then turns to Onishi-sensei, bidding him a final goodbye and stating they won't see each other again. As the teacher calls out for him to wait, Kurosawa walks away, declaring himself done with mountains. He reflects aloud that he only joined the mountaineering club for employment connections, and now it was all for nothing. From that point on, Kurosawa's life changed. He recounts how, to stay out of the public eye, he turned his back on the limelight. He recalls how the media and people connected to the mountains attacked his character, waving their paper-thin flags of justice. The memory brings forth the image of a lone climber, panting with exertion on his sheer face. His thoughts drift back to a specific night on a mountain. A younger Onishi, clad in climbing gear, looks on with a serious expression as his partner spots something in the distance and shouts for him to look. Following his gaze, they see a solitary figure moving steadily up a vast, moonlit snowfield, a tiny silhouette against the immense, dark rock. Onishi stares in disbelief, realizing the climber is scaling a dangerously sharp wall. He exclaims that the person is doing it without an ice axe or crampons, calling it a pure act of suicide. The climber is Mori Bunnaru. The memory shifts to a moment where he and Onishi stood together, looking down at the glittering city lights below. Kurosawa remarks that Onishi may not understand, but not all humans would find that night view beautiful. He continues his explanation, his expression distant and knowing. He speaks of people who feel choked by the world below, who want to run away from the annoying connections with other humans. There are many, he muses, who think that way. He continued speaking to his companion under the light of the full moon, which illuminated the vast, snowy mountain pass. Addressing Onishi, he voiced a grim realization. They might not be able to catch up to that boy anymore. Under the light of a full moon, a vast, snow-covered mountain range stretches into the darkness. On a lower slope, a young man with dark, shaggy hair pants heavily, his breath turning to vapor in the frigid air. The climber is a lone figure, making his way across the immense and treacherous rock face, his path marked by a thin rope against the snow. The climber is revealed to be Onishi, his face strained as he hops for breath. Above him on the ascent, Kurosawa grits his teeth, his expression one of grim, focused determination. Looking up with alarm, Onishi shouts for Kurosawa to slow his pace, warning that if he continues climbing so recklessly, he will surely lose his life. Onishi cries out that they must save him, lamenting that he himself is 10 years out of practice. Kurosawa glances down from his perch, a cold smirk on his face. He dismisses Onishi's concern, telling him he's not a child anymore, and asking why he doesn't try to handle things himself for a change. His expression hardens as he continues his rebuke, calling Onishi an irresponsible man, and accusing him of being someone who would easily throw away his comrades on a mountain. Onishi's face twists in anguish at the accusation. He yells back that it was Kurosawa who taught him everything about the mountains, strength, technique, and judgment, and that he could never compete. He declares that Kurosawa is a person who desecrates the mountains and demands he never concern himself with them again. Kurosawa looks down, remarking on how conceited Onishi has become. Suddenly, the rope connecting them is severed with a sharp snap. Onishi cries out in shock as he loses his grip and begins to fall. He lets out a curse as he's thrown backward. In a swift, violent motion, Kurosawa is shown having just swung his ice axe. He then calls down with feigned concern, asking if Onishi is okay. He plummets into the abyss, a dark silhouette against the starry night sky with his severed rope trailing behind. In the foreground, Kurosawa's helmet is all that is seen of the betrayer. He plummets into the dark abyss, the severed rope whipping uselessly through the air. From the ledge above, Kurosawa watches his partner fall, a dark silhouette against the snow. The shock of the betrayal registers on Onishi's face. His mouth opens in a silent scream of disbelief as he dangles helplessly, the world turning upside down. Suspended against the vast, unforgiving rock face under a starry sky, he is a tiny, solitary figure hanging by a single thread. His eyes, wide with terror and confusion, fixate on the figure of Kurosawa far above him. A sharp, lancing pain brings a grim realization. His shoulder is dislocated. He cannot move, utterly helpless and at the mercy of the rope. Suddenly, he feels a tug. Looking up, Onishi sees Kurosawa holding the line with a single hand, a grunt of effort escaping his lips. A flicker of confusion crosses Onishi's face. Kurosawa's voice cuts through the cold air. He asks Onishi if it isn't a nice view, remarking that it's a fitting scene with the senpai and kohai in their proper positions. He then adds a terrifyingly practical note. With all his equipment, Onishi weighs nearly 100 kilos, an impossible weight to hold with one hand. Onishi stares back, bewildered. In response to his own grim assessment, Kurosawa's free hand moves, revealing the cold, metallic glint of a knife. Pure terror floods Onishi's face. Kurosawa looks down, lamenting that it's too bad, as he'd have liked to enjoy the sight a little longer. As he brings the blade to the taut rope, Onishi's final, desperate plea echoes in the cold air. Stop. The plea goes unheeded. The knife slices cleanly through the rope's fibers. The carabiner, suddenly free of its life-sustaining tension, tumbles away into the void. He struggles against the void, biting down on a strap to free his hands. He insists he is just maneuvering to set up a belay, but Kurosawa's voice cuts through the wind with a cold taunt, telling him not to wet himself. With his hands now free, he reaches out, his gloved fingers desperately seeking a hold on the icy rock face as he attempts to secure a new anchor. He feels the immense strain on the line, grimly acknowledging his own weight of 100 kilos. Looking at his bare, trembling hand, he resigns himself to the attempt, deciding he will have to try with his bare hands. Suddenly, his eyes widen in sheer, uncomprehending terror. A choked question escapes his lips, a simple, horrified why. The terror gives way to a primal effort to survive as he hauls on the rope, his face contorted in a grimace of pure exertion. His desperate gaze finds Kurosawa standing above him on the ledge. His voice cracks with betrayal as he asks why, insisting that he was sure Kurosawa wasn't that kind of person. In response, a wide, cruel grin spreads across Kurosawa's face. He lifts his boot and brings it down with crushing force, stomping on Onishi's fingers as they cling to the rock. The vision of betrayal on the frozen mountain dissolves. In the present, Mori Buntaru clings to a different rock face, his own climb echoing the tragedy. He reflects that no one would cut a climbing rope, that he would never cut anything. His focus sharpens, his eyes locking onto the summit ahead. He can see it, the peak. In a flashback to a treacherous mountain climb, a younger Onishi dangles precariously from a rope, his face a mask of terror as he looks up at his partner, Kurosawa. You didn't cut the rope? He stammers in disbelief. Above him, Kurosawa, face grim and partially obscured by a balaclava, dismisses the question, stating they don't have time to complain. He shouts Onishi's name, preparing to haul him up. With his ice axe firmly planted as an anchor, Kurosawa begins to pull. The rope strains and groans under the immense weight, vibrating with the tension of a life-or-death struggle against gravity. He grits his teeth, a guttural sound of pure exertion escaping his lips. Every muscle in his jaw is taut as he pours all his strength into saving his companion. The strain on a mountainside is too much. A section of ice and rock breaks loose from above, shattering and cascading down directly towards Onishi, who can only look up in shock. Debris strikes Onishi with brutal force. He cries out as his helmet takes the impact, his gloved hand flailing uselessly against the barrage of falling ice. From his perch, Kurosawa looks down with alarm, seeing Onishi has landed on a tiny, unstable ledge. Onishi, he yells, hurry and get your footing. With one final, monumental effort, Kurosawa successfully pulls Onishi onto the safety of the wider ledge. Both men are completely exhausted, panting heavily against the frozen rock face, the immediate danger having passed. As he recovers, Onishi's gaze falls upon Kurosawa's equipment. He notices a pair of rings, one plain and one with a stone, clipped together on a carabiner attached to Kurosawa's harness. The memory dissolves, returning to the present. Mori Bunnaru fixes his intense gaze on the journalist Kurosawa. Kurosawa-san, he demands, his voice cutting through the silence. Please tell me, what happened on that day 10 years ago? Kurosawa doesn't answer, his mind drifting back to the mountain. He recalls his promise to his fiancée, Reiko. His internal thought is a solemn vow. That winter, after they got down from Hodaka, they were going to get married. His grip faltered in the blinding snowstorm. The journalist's memory plunged back to that day on the mountain, to his younger self straining against the weight on the rope. He grunted, thinking he just needed to hold on a little longer, but a critical piece of equipment, a carabiner, slipped with a sharp click. The sound alerted the climber below him. It was Onishi, his face pale with shock as he looked up. He breathed Kurosawa's first name, Mutsumi, realizing how close they had just come to disaster. But below Onishi hung another climber, Reiko. Her strength was failing. She looked up, her voice strained, and stated the grim reality of their situation. It was impossible. She was going to fall. Kurosawa yelled at her not to say such things, insisting they would find another way. Reiko, however, remained calm and rational. She explained that with their combined weight and the prusik hitch they were using, there was no time to climb back up. It was better for one person to be saved than for both of them to die. She then made a chilling observation. Climbing ropes, while strong lengthwise, are surprisingly easy to cut horizontally. Kurosawa screamed for her to stop. She met his desperation with a faint, determined smile. She reasoned that if her luck held, she might survive the fall with only a serious injury. And with that sliver of hope, she told him she would not say goodbye. In that moment, a blade sliced cleanly through the fibers of the taut rope. As she fell away into the snowy abyss, her final words echoed up to him. She called his name, Mutsumi, and confessed, I love you. The memory continued, shifting to the aftermath. Kurosawa recounted how he had descended to the bottom of the valley where Reiko fell, driven by the desire for them to wear the wedding rings they had prepared. But no matter how much he searched the desolate snow, he never found her left arm. Back in the present, Kurosawa's face was a mask of old grief. He clutched the carabiner that held those same 2 rings. He told Mori there had been nothing he could do. He was stuck with both of them. He finally confessed the truth that had haunted him for a decade. Reiko had cut her own rope for his sake. But, he admitted, it felt the same as if he had cut it himself. Mori stared, his expression one of utter shock, and demanded an answer. But, why didn't you say that? Why did you tell such a lie? His furious question hung in the air, but the roots of the answer lay in another man's past. 10 years ago, Onishi had been consumed by guilt, wishing for a physical beating. He believed it would have been far easier if he were simply hated for his actions. This desire for punishment, however, was met with a startling confession from Kurosawa. He calmly informed Onishi that the punch he'd received had been effective. The statement left Onishi staring in disbelief, unable to comprehend what he was hearing. Kurosawa continued, a faint, almost cynical smile playing on his lips, clarifying that he didn't hate Onishi's wholehearted nature. For Onishi, who had carried the weight of that day for 10 years, the words were a profound shock, causing him to stammer Kurosawa's name. The memory fades, returning to the present where Onishi-sensei helps Kurosawa up from the ground. Kurosawa dismisses the recent blow from Mori, telling him to come on. Onishi, however, declares that he first needs to go lecture the brat for his insolence. Agreeing, Onishi-sensei stands beside him. They both gaze out at the vast, rocky landscape under the light of a full moon, as a faint sound echoes from the darkness. That sound comes from Mori, now clinging to a sheer cliff face in the dead of night. He struggles, grunting in frustration as his fingers fail to grasp a hold just out of reach. He doesn't understand why he can't make it. His confusion instantly morphs into a chilling dread. His eyes widen in sheer panic as he stares at his own hand, struck by a terrible realization. He has no feeling in it whatsoever. A glance confirms his terror. The hand is grotesquely swollen and discolored, its fingers puffed and useless. A single, frantic question screams through his mind. What's wrong with my hand? The climb is titled Memory of Falling. Mori Bunnaru stares in wide-eyed horror at his own hand, the fingers swollen and pale, the nails turning dark, a clear sign of severe frostbite. His panic intensifies as he examines his other hand, finding it in the same condition. Clinging to the icy rock face, he cries out in disbelief, questioning what is happening to his body. He realizes with mounting terror that he can't feel a thing. He tries to clench his fists, but his hands are numb and unresponsive. The sensation is completely gone. The full weight of his situation crashes down on him. Alone on the vast, unforgiving mountain, he understands that he is completely stuck. The realization is grim. This is bad. The scene shifts to a memory. A younger Onishi, dazed on a similar climb, is berated by his captain, Kurosawa, for spacing out. As his captain yells at him to get a grip, Onishi internally questions his entire motivation for climbing, wondering what he has been believing in for the past 10 years. Back in the present, Onishi-sensei pushes himself up the mountain, his face a mask of frustration. He laments having to climb with a bare hand, driven by the need to catch Mori while he still has feeling in his own fingers. He fears the frostbite and potential amputation, struggling to keep up the pace. From their vantage point below, the observers spot Mori high on the mountain. They confirm that he has finally reached the south ridge, placing him just below the summit. Their relief turns to confusion. Kurosawa points out that Mori isn't moving, despite there being easy handholds just above him. He's simply clinging to the rock. Onishi-sensei watches in disbelief, agreeing that something is very odd. Mori remains frozen in place, a small figure against the vast, cold rock face. The wind howls around him, but he makes no move to continue his ascent. His eyes grow heavy. A dangerous thought surfaces as his body temperature plummets. It's cold, and he's feeling sleepy now. The insidious lethargy of hypothermia begins to take hold. His consciousness, adrift on the frozen mountain, plunges into a memory of rebellion. He stands before the school building, his voice tearing through the air with a defiant shout. He's quitting this damn school. From somewhere above, a voice retorts with equal venom. No problem, you bastard. The memory splinters into a chaotic collage. A school transfer notice, the official document that started all. Miyamoto's aggressive face, demanding he say something. Onishi-sensei's worried expression. The freedom of climbing towards the sky, contrasted with the desolate, snowy mountains. All of it swirls together. The dirty, frustrating world of school versus the pure, dangerous allure of the peaks. These fragments coalesce into a single, pivotal encounter on the school rooftop. Miyamoto stands there, addressing Mori by his full first name, Bunharu. He declares that he is tired of it all and is going to wash everything away. Mori, crouched on the ground, is baffled, admitting he doesn't understand. Miyamoto simply notes that he knew Mori wouldn't say anything. Then, without another word, Miyamoto leans back, his body arching over the rooftop railing, balancing precariously above the long drop to the ground. The sight triggers a horrifyingly familiar memory. Mori's eye widens in shock as his mind flashes back to the mountain, to the moment of another fall and the desperate cries of a young Onishi as disaster struck. The two moments blur into one. On the rooftop, Miyamoto looks to the sky. On the mountain, Mori does the same. The memory of the past incident superimposes itself onto the present danger, a distant figure tumbling from a cliff face. The thought echoes through his mind. That kid fell. The image of the fall brings his own mortality into sharp focus. Lying on the frozen mountain, he resigns himself to his fate. It's no good. I'm gonna die. The memory shifts back to the school rooftop, where he now stands alone, looking down from the railing where Miyamoto had been. He stares into the face of Miyamoto from his memory, a look of unnerving intensity in the other boy's eyes. A profound regret surfaces in Mori's mind, a thought filled with anguish. I wish I'd stopped him back then. The memory plays out its horrific conclusion. Miyamoto's body plummets towards the ground as students below scream in terror, crying murder. From the rooftop, Mori looks down, connecting his own current predicament to that past failure. If he had stopped him, he thinks he wouldn't be falling now, either. His thoughts drift back to the icy reality of the mountain. He realizes that if he had acted differently then, he wouldn't have ended up in this desolate place, either. His frostbitten hand reaches feebly towards the sky as his thought trails off, and a question echoes in his fading consciousness, cutting through the cold. Are you really satisfied with that? His eyes snap open, wide with terror. As his mind fights to hold on, he hallucinates a voice from his past, the climber Onishi, screaming encouragement, telling him not to give up, to grab something. A single desperate thought forms. No, I don't want to die. That desperate refusal to die catapults him back into the memory of the fall. He sees himself tumbling through the air, his school uniform stained, his hand reaching out into the void. His mind screams the same frantic plea from that day. I don't want to die. As he plummets, the hallucinated voice of Onishi shouts in triumph from the sidelines of his memory. All right. He grabs onto it. Mori's body is violently jerked as his desperate grasp finds purchase, arresting his descent. His fingers dig into the material, a death grip. With a guttural strain, he holds on, his mind hardening with resolve. I'm not giving up yet, he thinks, refusing to let go. The full, horrifying memory crystallizes. He wasn't grabbing a ledge, he was grabbing his rival. As Miyamoto fell from the school rooftop, Mori had lunged and caught him, his arms wrapping around Miyamoto's body as they both plunged downwards together. The driving impulse becomes terrifyingly clear. I still want to cling to this guy. Panting, Mori Buntaru clings to the rock face. For him, this is a do-or-die moment. His raw, scraped fingers dig into the stone as his wide eyes stare upward, fixed on the looming mountain peak. He gazes at the summit, which seems to glitter in the darkness, presenting a direct path to the top. He feels as if the mountain itself is beckoning him, telling him to keep climbing. Galvanized, he begins to move again, scrambling up the rock. Far below, two observers watch in shock. Look, one shouts, he started climbing again. The climber in the helmet turns to his companion. Onishi, his voice urgent. He reports that Mori fell nearly 5 meters and it's dangerous for him to exert himself further. He declares their only option is to proceed with minimum noble A preparations, demanding to know if Onishi has any objections. Onishi stares ahead, his expression frozen with indecision. What's wrong, Onishi? The leader presses. You all right? Clenching a fist, Onishi forces out a yes, silently telling himself that he can do this. Far above the struggling pursuers, Mori finds his focus. He sees a crack leading straight to the peak and resolves that even if his fingers fail, he will grip the rocks with his entire palms. A wild, breathless grin spreads across his dirt-streaked face. Wait for me, he pants, his voice carried away by the wind. I'm coming right now. Below, the leader curses in frustration. Goddamn, he's fast. We can't catch up with him. He glares at the heavily breathing Onishi. He's totally messing with us, isn't he? With us out here trying to ensure his safety, his pace just keeps getting faster. The leader watches Mori's ascent, dumbfounded. He mutters that a mountain is a dangerous thing, something a person overcomes. But as he watches the impossible climb, his eyes widen in dawning horror. It can't be, he thinks. Onishi's thoughts spiral, consumed by the image of Mori Buntaru. He remembers teaching that one cannot climb mountains or live life alone. He believed in the strength of connections, of belaying one another. But Mori, he reflects, tossed all that away, leaping onto the mountain to reach the heights by himself. His reflection darkens as he imagines a climbing rope, the very symbol of that connection, snapping under strain. It is as if the mountain itself has accepted Mori, severing him from the world of man. This thought triggers a traumatic memory. He sees himself, falling through the air, his own rope severed. The foundation of his belief system cracks, and he questions if the mountain of philosophy he has been climbing was ever real or just a fragile mountain of sand. His eyes are wide with the remembered shock, a silent testament to the terror of that moment. In the memory, a frantic voice screams his name, pleading for him to get down. He looks up, startled and confused by the sudden alarm. He glances upward to see a massive block of ice and rock hurtling down towards him. His eye, wide with primal fear, reflects the impending impact. The debris strikes him in a blur of motion. In that instant of pain, a single thought pierces his consciousness. Was I mistaken? The memory fades. Back in the present, Mori stands on a snowy precipice as the sun rises. A faint sound like a name, Onishi, seems to drift on the wind, and he looks up suddenly alert. He stands alone, a solitary figure against the vast, sun-drenched expanse of the mountain peaks. But his face shows no triumph. He pants, sweat on his brow, his eyes wide with a breathless, profound shock, as if he has just witnessed the impossible or understood a terrible truth. He stands alone on the desolate, snow-covered summit, amidst what appear to be memorial crosses marking the treacherous peak. In the sky above, rescue helicopters converge on his position. A transmission from the Nagano Disaster Prevention Unit crackles through, confirming the rescue has been located on the south ridge of Mount Aka. The broadcast continues with a grim update. One of the rescuers has fallen, and their condition and survival are unknown. The message repeats, underscoring the urgency and tragedy of the situation. Amid a chaotic scrum of reporters, Mori Buntaru arrives, the boy who was rescued. Shouts for people to make way mix with questions about his condition. Reports indicate he has only minor frostbite, with no other major external injuries. He is hooded and appears dazed as he is guided through the crowd. His eyes widen in shock as Kurosawa, another climber, faces him with a grim expression. Kurosawa apologizes for worrying him, explaining that he and Onishi had gone to follow Mori by themselves. As he speaks, the image of a helicopter airlifting a securely wrapped body from the snowy mountain peak underscores his words. The deceased, he implies, will not be coming back down on their own 2 feet. Mori stares ahead, stunned into silence by the finality of the situation. At the base camp, someone attempts to console him, insisting it is not his fault and that such tragedies are a known risk of the mountains. A memorial highlights the legacy of the fallen climber, Onishi Masao. A prominent figure in Japanese mountaineering, his career began in high school and led to renowned ascents of El Capitan, the Trango Nameless Tower, and pioneering new routes on Fitzroy and Gusherbroom 4. He is pictured at a moment of triumph, holding a flag bearing the kanji for spirit. At Onishi's funeral, the teacher, Mr. Onishi, delivers an emotional eulogy, vowing to one day join his friend and climb with him again. Nearby, Unishi's grieving parents watch as a young man holds the memorial portrait. The funeral procession begins, the hearse's headlights cutting through the gloom. Mori, now holding the portrait, stand among his classmates, including a grim-faced Miyamoto. As the hearse departs, the students bow their heads in a final show of respect. Mori, however, lifts his gaze, his expression stark and unreadable, his eyes dry. Back at school, whispers follow Mori. Students discuss the incident, recalling a previous mountain mishap and labeling him a problem child. They openly question why he shows no remorse, not shedding a single tear when someone died because of him. One bitterly remarks that Unishi's sense of responsibility led to his demise at the hands of someone with no common sense. He turns as Miyamoto steps away from the gossiping group and approaches him directly. Calling out his name, Miyamoto asks if he has a moment. He stands silently as Miyamoto, sitting on a stone ledge, makes a startling announcement. With Unishi gone, Miyamoto has also quit school, declaring he no longer has any reason to remain in Japan. His expression is one of grim determination as he reveals his destination. He is going to France. Mori finally speaks, asking what Miyamoto plans to do there. Miyamoto explains he'll find work and climb, taking on the rocks one by one, and perhaps even settle there permanently if things don't go well. When Mori asks if he's quitting climbing, Miyamoto retorts that he wouldn't be surprised if Mori did, after what happened. He concludes that he doesn't expect they'll meet again and simply wanted to tell him this much before leaving. With a simple "see ya," Miyamoto departs, leaving only the image of a lone lamppost against a cloudy sky. Elsewhere, a different kind of resolution is made. A pair of hands hovers over a laptop keyboard, a finger poised to press the send key, dispatching a story to the press. The hands belong to the journalist, Kurosawa Mutsumi, who sits in a dimly lit bar. When the bartender offers to make him a drink, Kurosawa declines, stating he brought his own bottle. He speaks to the memory of Unishi, admitting he doesn't know if he's fit to take his place, but that this is the only support he can offer as a journalist. With newfound resolve, he announces he is quitting alcohol and smoking, starting today, as he begins to pour out the contents of his bottle. A cynical smile touches his lips as he thinks to himself that half-broken old bonds are easy to restore. Meanwhile, Mori Buntaru arrives at a hospital. A nurse, taking pity on a patient who refuses to see his own family, has secretly let Mori in. She warns him that family visiting hours begin in an hour and urges him to hurry. Mori simply agrees, his destination confirmed as room 203. He approaches the room. A heart monitor inside displays a steady, rhythmic pulse as the door creaks open. He stepped into the hospital room, his form a dark silhouette against the sterile light. In the bed, surrounded by monitors and 4 drips, lay a figure with long, light-toned hair, his rival, Mizuki. Mizuki's face was pale and still, his eyes closed. An oxygen mask covered his mouth and nose, his breathing sustained by the machine. Looking down at the unconscious boy, Mori's own expression was wide-eyed and intense. He spoke quietly, addressing Mizuki directly, stating that he had found something he wanted to do before him. Standing beside the bed, a solitary figure amidst the quiet beeping of machines, he finished his declaration. He had decided on his path, becoming a climber. The weight of his vow brought tears to his eyes. He whispered an apology, acknowledging that he might hurt someone, but admitted with grim finality that he couldn't stop himself anymore. 2 years later, under a blazing sun, the teacher Unishi loosened his tie, sweating profusely. He looked around the industrial area in disbelief, muttering about the heat and questioning if that guy could really be in such a place. His search had brought him to the Tsurumi Gulf Coast, a sprawling complex of warehouses and shipping cranes baking in the summer heat. On the treacherous slopes of Kangshinjunga, at an elevation of 8,203 meters, the temperature plummets to minus 30 degrees. Amidst the blinding snow and howling winds, Mori Buntaru grits his teeth, his face raw and exposed to the brutal elements. His eyes, heavy with exhaustion and rimmed with frost, struggle to stay open. He carefully unwraps a single, precious piece of chocolate, calculating its value, 40 calories. Enough for one more day. He pulls the thin fabric of his hood tighter, a fierce determination hardening his gaze. He must endure. The weather will improve. He makes a silent, unbreakable vow to himself. He will absolutely not die. The memory, or vision, is shattered by a voice calling his name. A man with a mustache parts a heavy curtain, peering into a frosty space. More 3, he calls out. You're in here, right? The here is a massive, industrial freezer, its pipes and walls caked in thick ice. Mori sits among boxes of frozen goods, wrapped in a simple cloth against the biting cold. The man tells him to come out, informing him that the branch manager is calling. As he emerges from the frigid chamber, 2 of his co-workers watch him pass. One lets out a grunt of surprise. The other, a man with a mustache, dismissively remarks that Mori is just a temp, both of them clearly perplexed by his behavior. They continue to gossip as Mori walks away, noting that it's been 2 full years since he dropped out of school to work at the super low-temperature refrigeration warehouse. They find him unnervingly serious, someone who never socializes, leaving them to wonder what he could possibly do for fun. Now wearing the official uniform of the Tsurumi Gulf Coast Refrigeration Company, Mori stands before his superior. A voice, calm and direct, breaks the silence. I know it's sudden, but would you like to become a full-time employee? The speaker is the branch manager, a man whose face is fixed in a wide, persuasive smile. He explains that a full-time position is opening up next month and praises Mori's serious work ethic. He promises a letter of recommendation for the exam, calling it a mere formality, and dangles the prospect of no longer being treated like a temporary employee. Leaning forward, the manager presses his case. He insists an opportunity like this won't come again. While acknowledging that Mori's on-duty hours would increase, he emphasizes the benefits: insurance, a salary, a stable livelihood. Well, I won't say anything unpleasant, he concludes. Just please agree to what I've said. The branch manager can only utter a confused huh in response. Before him, Mori Buntaru stands rigid, his expression unreadable as he delivers a blunt refusal. He does not want the position. He turns to leave and is met by a young female co-worker holding a tray. She asks with some surprise if he is already going home. Mori looks down, offering only a quiet, non-committal sound in reply, before continuing on his way. She watches in silence as he walks out the door, her gaze lingering with an unspoken question as he disappears from the building. Outside, Mori stands before the vast brick facade of the warehouse. He glances at his watch, 12:28 p.m., and internally calculates that he can do what he needs to in his last 30 minutes. With that thought, he begins pulling off his work shirt. The shirt comes off, revealing a body sculpted by relentless training. Every muscle across his torso and arms is sharply defined, a testament to his singular, obsessive focus. He then sits and begins his ritual, pulling a tight-fitting climbing shoe onto his foot with practiced force, preparing his body for the ascent. His expression hardens into one of pure, unwavering concentration. The world outside his immediate task seems to fall away, leaving only the challenge ahead. With that intense focus, his fingers find their first purchase, pressing firmly against the narrow edge of a single brick on the wall. Meanwhile, in a nearby alley, the journalist Kurosa Amatsumi walks with a weary but determined stride. He wonders aloud if the person he seeks is really in a place like this. Musing that with this kind of heat, it wouldn't be out of the question for the Himalayan glaciers to melt. Unseen by the journalist, Mori Buntaru is indeed there. He is a solitary figure ascending the sheer vertical face of the warehouse, using only the tiny imperfections in the brickwork as holds, climbing ever higher. His physique was astonishing. The journalist, Kurosawa, stared in disbelief, realizing that all extraneous fat had been stripped away, leaving only muscles developed to an abnormal, almost inhuman, level. He recognized it instantly as the ideal body type for a climber. And the wall Mori was scaling, it was a challenge in itself. The journalist's mind raced as he watched the ascent, realizing Mori's climbing was improving at an incredible rate. The grooves between the bricks were less than a millimeter, yet he moved upward. Kurosawa estimated the difficulty at a staggering grade 5.12. He put the grade in perspective, recalling that the world's hardest climb was once a 5.11, a route that took a top team 37 days. But now, in an age where climbers were conquering 5.15s, a young man had cleared a legendary face in just over 4 hours. His gaze returned to the boy on the wall, a sense of awe dawning on him. He finally understood the sheer scale of Mori Buntaru's progress in just 2 short years. Having reached the rooftop, Mori consulted a hand-drawn map of a mountainous area. His eyes then shifted to the port below, a large ship moving across the water. A decision formed in his mind. His next vacation would be there. He stood, surveying the sprawling port, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. For the moment, he was content with his path.